Get comfortable. Pull the blanket up a little tighter. Maybe turn the lights down just a bit more. Because tonight, we are going somewhere that is simultaneously the most colorful and the most quietly unsettling place in all of children's television. We are going to Elmore, California, a town where the sky is photographed, the residents are drawn, and the rules of reality are genuinely philosophically terrifying if you look at them long enough. And tonight, we are going to look at them for a very long time. Welcome to Watterson Lore. My name is your guide through the dark underbelly of the amazing world of Gumball. And I need you to understand something before we go any further. This is not a light topic. This show, this beautiful, chaotic, hilarious, brilliant show about a blue cat and a talking goldfish in California, is one of the most philosophically loaded pieces of animation ever produced for a young audience. It asks questions that most television shows for adults would flinch away from. What happens when the universe decides you are no longer worth keeping? What does it mean to have an identity that was built for someone else's entertainment? What is the difference between a story and a life when both of them depend on someone watching? I have been thinking about these questions for a long time. I have rewatched this show more times than I am prepared to admit. I have sat with the lore, untangled the threads, cross-referenced the episodes, and I am ready to take you through every single layer of this world tonight. From the very first mystery all the way to what the revival series, The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball, revealed about the ultimate fate of Elmore and every soul inside it. So take a breath, settle in. Let your mind go somewhere a little softer, somewhere in the gentle haze between waking and sleep, where mysteries feel more like warm bedtime stories than cold puzzles. Because that is exactly where this show lives, right at that threshold where something funny and something deeply true about human existence occupy the exact same space. Tonight, we are covering it all. Every major character, every mystery, every chilling implication, every piece of lore that Ben Bockelay and his team spent years laying down across 6 seasons and a revival, building a world that should not work but absolutely does. We start, as we must, with the world itself, with Elmore. Section 1. The world of Elmore and the show that built it from rejection. There's a story behind the amazing world of Gumball that most casual viewers never hear, and once you know it, every single thing about the show changes. Not in a dramatic, earth-shattering way, more like the way a piece of music changes when you find out what the composer was going through when they wrote it. It adds a layer of feeling to something you already loved. Ben Bockelay was a French-born animator working in commercial animation at a studio called Studio AKA in London. His job was to create characters for advertising pitches. He would dream up a character, design them, give them a voice and a personality, and then submit them for consideration. And then more often than not, nothing would happen. The client would pass, the pitch would fail, the character would go into a folder and never be used again. By the time Bockelay moved on from commercial work to join the newly formed Cartoon Network Development Studio Europe in 2007, he had a digital graveyard full of characters that nobody wanted. When Cartoon Network told its new studio employees to pitch their own show ideas, Bockelay looked at that graveyard and had an idea. What if all those rejected characters had somewhere to go? What if there was a place in the world for the ones nobody picked? His original pitch was called Gumball, and it was about a remedial school for reject cartoon characters who were learning how to become more likable to mainstream audiences. It was, in his own words later, a show about rejects, about the unwanted and the forgotten. The producers at Cartoon Network heard this pitch and said something very telling. They said the concept was too sad. Too sad. So Bockelay took the DNA, all those mismatched characters from all those failed pitches, the 2D characters, the CGI ones, the puppets, the photographic backgrounds from real London streets, and he wrapped it in a family sitcom structure. He named the characters after his own family. Nicole after his mother, Richard after his father, Aeneas after his sister. He put his own flesh and blood into a world built from the discarded. And on May 9th, 2011, The Amazing World of Gumball premiered on Cartoon Network. What Bockelay had created was, on the surface, a very funny show about a 12-year-old blue cat named Gumball Watterson and his pet goldfish turned adoptive brother Darwin, who attended Elmore Junior High alongside an absolutely impossible collection of classmates. There were robots and clouds and bananas and ghosts and pieces of toast and literal rocks all sharing the same hallways. The show's visual style was unlike anything else on television. 2D animated characters walking through photographic backgrounds taken from real-world London locations, rendered in a dozen different styles so that no two characters looked like they belonged in the same show. That visual dissonance was not an accident, it was the entire point. Because every character in Elmore is, on a deep structural level, a reject, a misfit, something that was made for one purpose and ended up somewhere entirely different. And the world Bacale gave them is one that, if you look at it carefully enough, is a place that runs on rules you would never agree to if someone spelled them out for you plainly. Elmore is located in California, in a specific suburb that the show's geography suggests sits near Vallejo. It is a normal enough American town on the surface. There is a school, a mall, a joyful burger, a rainbow factory where Nicole works, and row after row of residential streets where the Wattersons and their neighbors live out their days. The sun rises, kids go to school, families argue over dinner. Life in Elmore has the warm, domestic feeling of every American family sitcom that ever aired. But Elmore has a rule so fundamental that it underlies every single moment of every single episode, even when no one mentions it. That rule is this: the world has standards, and things that fall below those standards do not stay in the world. They go somewhere else. The show builds to this slowly. In the first couple of seasons, it is pure comedy. Beautifully constructed episodes that use the show's mixed media style to tell jokes that could only exist in this particular universe. Gumball and Darwin get into trouble. Nicole rescues or disciplines them. Richard is helplessly, cosmically inept. Aeneas is baffled by all of them. The world of Elmore feels alive and chaotic and very funny. But then something starts to creep in from the edges. A background character disappears. A classmate that nobody can quite remember. A dimension made of static that hums at the edge of the frame when you are not looking directly at it. And slowly, over the course of 6 seasons and a revival, the amazing world of Gumball reveals itself to be something so philosophically loaded, so densely packed with genuine existential horror wrapped inside slapstick and bright colors that you start to wonder how it got past the standards department at Cartoon Network at all. The answer, of course, is the same answer to every great piece of art that has ever smuggled difficult truth inside an accessible container. You make it funny enough. You make it warm enough. You make the characters lovable enough that by the time the philosophical weight starts to settle on you, you are already too invested to walk away. And here's the thing about the amazing world of Gumball that I want you to carry with you through everything we discussed tonight. Bacale said in an interview with Squiggly Animation magazine that he wanted Elmore to feel real. He wanted children to believe they could visit it. He was inspired by Who Framed Roger Rabbit, the idea of cartoon characters living in a tangible, physical world. He wanted, as he put it, young children to ask their parents to go on holiday to Elmore because they wanted to hang out with Gumball. He gave these rejected characters a home. He gave them a world so warm and so funny and so full of life that millions of people fell in love with it. And then, over the course of the show's run, he revealed that even this home, this warm and colorful and improbable home, was one mistake away from ceasing to exist. Because the show was always about the thing Bacale knew better than almost anyone. The terror of rejection, the fear of being discarded, the existential weight of being told that you are not good enough to exist in the world you thought was yours. He built a paradise for the unwanted, and then he had the courage to show them what paradise actually costs. Let me spend a moment on the show's visual design, because it is not incidental. It is not just a stylistic choice or a budget-saving decision or a quirky aesthetic that differentiates it from other cartoons. The visual design of the amazing world of Gumball is the show's philosophy made visible. It is the show telling you, in every single frame, exactly what it believes about identity and belonging and the meaning of existence. And once you understand what it is telling you, you cannot unsee it. The backgrounds of Elmore are photographs. Real photographs, predominantly of locations in and around London, England, where the show was produced at Cartoon Network Development Studio Europe. The grocery store interiors, the suburban streets, the school hallways, the parks, the roadsides, All of it captured in the real world and then populated with animated characters who exist on top of that photographic reality without quite belonging to it. This creates an immediate and constant visual tension. The characters do not look like they belong in their own world. They are too flat for the three-dimensional space they inhabit. Their colors are too saturated for the muted tones of real photography. They cast no realistic shadows on the photographic surfaces beneath them. They are visitors in a world that was not built for them, and every single frame of the show makes that visible. Now consider the characters themselves. Gumball and Darwin and the Watterson family are rendered in traditional 2D animation, the closest thing the show has to a default visual language. But Tina Rex is fully realized 3D CGI, a different dimension of existence entirely. The Robinsons, Gumball's grumpy neighbors, are rendered in a style that makes them look like puppets, stiff and controlled in a way that no other character is. Idaho is claymation, with the specific physical weight and texture of stop motion. Sussy, the chin puppet, is a live-action human chin filmed upside down and given googly eyes, a piece of reality inserted directly into the animation with no apology and no explanation. No two major characters in Elmore look like they belong in the same show, because they do not. They are, literally, characters from different shows who were gathered together in one place. They are Bachelot's rejected commercial characters, each designed for a different project, a different aesthetic vision, a different intended audience. They found themselves in Elmore because no other world would have them. What does this visual dissonance mean for the characters' experience of their world? Think about it from their perspective. Every single day, Gumball looks at Tina Rex, who is rendered in a completely different visual language than he is. When they stand next to each other, the difference in their visual nature is not invisible. It is present in every frame. They come from different kinds of existence. They are, in a literal visual sense, made of different stuff. And yet they inhabit the same world. They go to the same school. They eat at the same restaurant. They experience the same weather and attend the same events. The visual chaos of Elmore is not a problem to be solved. It is the world they live in. It is what normal looks like for them. The impossibility of their coexistence is the condition of their coexistence. There is a fan theory, backed by enough textual evidence to take seriously, that the characters' visual styles are a hierarchy of ontological status. The closer a character is to the Wattersons, to the center of the narrative, the more cohesive and stable their visual rendering. Gumball and his family are 2D animated because they are the most narratively fundamental characters in the show. They are the show in the most literal sense. Characters in their immediate orbit, like Penny and Darwin's classmates at Elmore Junior High, are rendered in various styles but all recognizably as cartoon characters of one kind or another. Background characters, the extras who populate scenes without speaking, become progressively less visually defined, less stable, less certain of their own forms. And at the absolute edge of the visual hierarchy, at the point where the cartoon meets the real world most directly, you have Sussy, a live-action chin, a piece of genuine human anatomy dropped into an animated universe. She is, according to the most compelling fan reading of her existence, the show's most direct acknowledgement that the boundary between fiction and reality is not fixed. She is real in the literal sense, more real than anyone else in Elmore. She is also the most alien presence in the school, the most deeply strange, the one character who makes even the other students visibly uncomfortable. If the world of the show exists as a broadcast, as the mythology strongly suggests, then Sussy is the signal bleeding. She is the real world leaking through the animation. She is the audience made flesh, somehow ended up inside the story they were supposed to be watching from outside. And she is the character who gives the most satisfying answer to the question of life's meaning. In the episode The Question, where Gumball and Darwin spend the entire episode asking everyone in Elmore what life is for. Doctors, counselors, strangers, plants, the universe itself, all of them give answers that are either inadequate or terrifying. And then Sussy, sitting on a bench, in that flat and strange and somehow entirely honest voice that is genuinely human rather than performed, tells them that life is about the journey and finding your own way to enjoy it. The most real character in Elmore has the most grounded answer. The piece of genuine human reality has the most human response to the most human question. The show knew what it was doing. Before we dive deeper, I want to pause right here and ask something of you. Drop a comment below telling me where you are watching this from tonight, what time it is, and what you are doing. Whether you are lying in bed in the dark, studying, cooking, on a late-night drive somewhere, whatever your situation is tonight. I love knowing where these videos find people. It means more than you know. And while you are down there, if you are not already subscribed to Watterson Lore, tap that button. Every subscriber keeps this channel alive and keeps us doing exactly what we are doing right now. Okay, back to Elmore. Section 2, The Void. Elmore's most terrifying secret. Every great fictional world has a foundation, something that explains why the world is the way it is, some deep structural principle that, once understood, makes every single other thing in that world click into place. For Elmore, that foundation is the void, and the void is one of the most genuinely unsettling concepts in the history of animated television for children. We first encounter it in the 3rd season, in an episode called simply The Void. Gumball and Darwin start to notice that one of their classmates, a girl named Molly Collins, a quiet gray sauropod dinosaur character who had appeared in the background of the show since the 1st season, has vanished. Not just from school, from their memories. They can barely remember her at all. They are the only ones who seem to notice her absence, and even their awareness of that absence is fuzzy, like trying to hold The thing that makes this immediately disturbing, even before we understand the mechanics of what is happening, is the precision of the show's execution. Molly was genuinely forgettable. She appeared in crowd scenes. She had one notable episode in the 1st season, The Pressure, but after that, she faded into the background. The show spent 2 seasons quietly making her harder and harder to remember, so that when Gumball and Darwin realize she is gone, so does the audience. It is a trick that works completely, and it works because it is not really a trick. It is the show demonstrating its central horror in real time, using you, the viewer, as the subject. Gumball, Darwin, and their school counselor, Mr. Small, investigate her disappearance and are eventually pulled into the void itself, a dimension that appears as an infinite expanse of television static, a crackling white-gray nothingness filled with the things the universe has decided are mistakes. Let that settle in for a moment. The universe has decided are mistakes. In the void, Gumball and Darwin find not just Molly, but a collection of abandoned things. Outdated fads, failed products, dangerous inventions. Molly's treehouse from The Pressure is there with her. A prototype of the Watterson house that was evidently an early rejected design. 80s hairspray, deemed a mistake because of its environmental toxicity. A keytar, a fad instrument from the wrong era. A Zeppelin, sent there after the Hindenburg disaster. The void is, functionally, the universe's deletion folder. Everything in it has been not just removed from Elmore, but erased from memory. The moment something is sent to the void, the world folds over the space where it used to be, and everyone who knew it forgets it existed. The show does not treat this lightly. It treats it as the horror it is. When Gumball and Darwin talk to Molly, they are brutally, almost cruelly honest about how boring they find her, how easily they forgot her. And Molly, who has been alone in the static for what might have been a very long time, accepts this with a kind of quiet devastation that is genuinely difficult to watch. She knows why she is here. She knows the universe looked at her and made a judgment. They rescue her. They escape the void on Mr. Small's hippie van, a vehicle called Janice, who was herself sent to the void for being too eccentric and too much a relic of a bygone era. And Gumball, Darwin, Molly, and Mr. Small ride Janice back to reality, their tinfoil hats protecting their memories from being wiped. Except the tinfoil hats get sucked back into the void just as they escape. And by the next scene, all 4 of them have completely forgotten the whole ordeal. That is the first layer of the void's horror. It does not just erase the mistakes. It erases the memory of their erasure. The universe covers its tracks. There is no institutional memory of what the void claims, no trace left behind to warn others that the mechanism exists. that the standard is being enforced, that the quality control is running constantly in the background of every moment of life in Elmore. But as terrifying as Molly's story is, she is not the most important character in the Void sequence. She is not the reason the Void becomes the central mythology of the entire series. The most important character in that scene is someone else entirely. Someone standing in the static background of the Void that Gumball and Darwin walk directly past without noticing. A tall, skinny blue cyclops with a single large eye and long limbs, wearing red shorts and an orange-sleeved crop top. He is standing right there. He sees them. He reaches out. He tries to get their attention, and they walk past him as though he does not exist. His name is Rob. And we will come back to him very shortly because Rob's story is the axis around which everything else in Gumball rotates. But for now, let's sit with the Void itself, because its implications for the world of Elmore extend far beyond any single character. The Void tells us something fundamental about what Elmore is. It tells us that the world of Elmore has an active quality control mechanism. That reality itself is watching, constantly assessing, constantly making judgments about what is worth keeping and what is not. And the criteria it uses are not moral. They are not about whether something is good or kind or meaningful. The criteria are about relevance, about interest, about whether something is currently serving a function that makes it worth the space it occupies. Molly was erased because she was boring. Not evil, not dangerous. Boring. Think about the implications of that for every single character in Elmore. Every character who has not been sent to the Void is not there because they are virtuous, or worthy, or deserving of existence in some ethical sense. They are there because they have not yet been deemed irrelevant. They are there because they are still interesting enough, still functionally useful enough, still entertaining enough, that the universe has not yet made the judgment about judgment against them. In Elmore, your right to exist is conditional, and the conditions change. By the later seasons of the show, we understand something even more specific about the Void. Rob, who by this point has become the show's central antagonist, and in a deeply paradoxical way, one of its true heroes, figures out something that no other character has figured out. The Void is not just a cosmic trash bin. It is the end state. It is what happens when a show gets canceled, when the audience stops watching, when the story runs out of reasons to continue. In the episode The Future, from the 6th season, Rob kidnaps Banana Barbara, a character with the ability to paint prophetic visions of the future, because he needs to know what is coming. He wants to see whether there is still a future for Elmore. And every painting Banana Barbara attempts to produce of Elmore's future comes out the same way. Static. Just static. Pure white noise on the canvas, the visual signature of the Void rendered in oil paint. There is no future, she tells him. Flat, eerie, delivered in a tone that makes your chest tight, even if you cannot quite name why. There is no future because the future belongs to the Void. Because cancellation is coming. Because the story is running out of time. And Banana Barbara, whose prophetic abilities emerged from a traumatic breakdown caused by workplace burnout at a company called Chanax Incorporated, has been quietly painting the doom of her world in her garage for years, while her family went on about their business in cheerful, oblivious domesticity. The Void is cancellation. It is the obliteration of a story by the simple act of no longer caring about it. It is what happens when the audience changes the channel, and every single character in Elmore is dancing, consciously or not, to keep it at bay. This is the foundation. Everything else we discussed tonight, every dark theory, every hidden implication, every character's secret sorrow sits on top of this foundation. The Void is the ground beneath Elmore. The static is always humming, just below the frequency of what you can hear. And the moment anyone in Elmore is truly forgotten, truly irrelevant, truly no longer part of the story, the ground opens up beneath them. You can imagine the kind of quiet, constant anxiety that produces in a person. Even a person who does not consciously know the rules. Even a person who thinks they are just living their life in a colorful, chaotic suburb in California. You can imagine the kind of person it produces when someone does consciously know the rules. Section 3. Rob, the nobody who became everything. Rob's story might be the most complete and emotionally devastating character arc in modern Western animation. I say that with full awareness of how strong a claim that is, and I stand by it. Because what Bacale and his team did with Rob is something that very few shows at any level of prestige television have ever attempted, let alone achieved. They took the most invisible, the most deliberately forgettable character imaginable, and they built an entire mythology around what it feels like to be that person. Let us go back to the beginning. In seasons 1 and 2 of The Amazing World of Gumball, Rob exists as a background character. He is a tall, skinny blue cyclops with a single large eye, appearing in crowd scenes at Elmore Junior High. No storyline, no family, no development, no personality. He is furniture with a face. In the second season episode called The Pony, he manages to speak briefly, and Gumball and Darwin cannot even remember his name, calling him Ralph, Richie, and various other wrong names that begin with the letter R. When they accidentally knock him into a manhole, they forget about him within seconds. He is, in the most literal and painful sense, no one. The show was doing this deliberately. The creative team was letting Rob be exactly what the Void would eventually judge him as being: a background character without a distinctive purpose or justification for his existence. A mistake in the making. And then, in the Season 3 episode The Void, the hammer falls. The universe makes its judgment. Rob is sent to the static dimension. He is not erased from Elmore in the dramatic sense. There is no flash of light, no ceremony. He simply stops being noticed. The world folds over him, and everyone, including Gumball and Darwin, forgets he was ever there. He is alone in the white noise for what may be a very long time before Gumball and Darwin arrive to rescue Molly. The scene where they walk past him is one of the most quietly heartbreaking moments in the show's history. Rob sees them. He waves. He calls out. He is right there, close enough to touch, desperate for someone, anyone, to acknowledge that he exists. And they look right through him. They are focused on Molly, on the rescue, on getting out, and Rob is just the static of the background. He grabs the back of Janice at the last second. He holds on as the portal begins to close. And the Void, which does not release its mistakes lightly, tears at him as he tries to escape. It warps his body. It disfigures him. By the time he makes it back to the real world, he looks like a television set with a shattered screen. His head misshapen and polygonal, covered in static, his body glitching between different states. He has been physically marked by the dimension that tried to claim him forever. And then, in the episode The Nobody from Season 3, Gumball and Darwin discover that someone has been living in their basement. A strange, disfigured, amnesic creature who does not remember who he is or where he came from. When they confront him, he tells them something that functions as both a description of his literal situation and one of the most philosophically loaded lines in the entire show. He says, "I am a nobody. I have no place in this world." He is not being poetic. He is stating facts. The universe has literally classified him as having no place in the world. His existence has been judged insufficient. He is a mistake that got away from the deletion folder. And Gumball and Darwin, in the well-meaning but catastrophically thoughtless way they have of engaging with problems, try to help him figure out who he could be. They point out that every positive role in Elmore is already filled. The hero, the sidekick, the love interest, the comic relief, the best friend. Every role that comes with warmth and connection and a reason to be remembered, all of it is accounted for. There is only one vacancy in Elmore's social ecosystem that has not been claimed. The villain. And Rob, who has no identity, no memory, no reason to exist, no community, no family, and no home beyond the basement of the boy whose story consumed all the available light, makes the only choice the universe has left available to him. He takes the role. He becomes the bad guy. He becomes Gumball's arch nemesis, not because he is fundamentally evil, not because villainy is his nature, but because the alternative is the Void. The alternative is being erased again. The alternative is accepting that his existence has no narrative function. In Elmore's economy of meaning, you need a role. You need to matter to the story. And if the only story that has space for you is the story of the hero's enemy, then you become the enemy. I want to be specific about something here because this is where Rob's story becomes genuinely profound rather than merely dark. Rob is not wrong about any of this. He is right. He is completely, accurately, devastatingly right. The world does revolve around Gumball. Other characters do exist primarily to serve Gumball's story. The system is rigged in favor of the protagonist in exactly the way that any story is rigged in favor of its protagonist. That is how stories work. And in a world where the story is real, where the narrative rules have the force of physics, being the supporting character is not an aesthetic disappointment. It is an ontological limitation. It is the shape your existence is allowed to take. Rob becomes Gumball's nemesis across seasons 4, 5, and 6. He is villainous in the technical sense. He devises plans to destroy or embarrass Gumball. He acquires weapons and schemes and alter egos like Dr. Wrecker. But there is a specific quality to Rob's villainy that distinguishes it from any other antagonist in the show's history. It is never quite convincing, and everyone, including Rob, seems to know it. In The Nemesis, the episode that properly introduces Rob as a villain, he tries to trap Gumball and Darwin in an elaborate scheme. The scheme fails, not because Gumball and Darwin are clever enough to defeat it, but because they keep accidentally avoiding it while being completely oblivious to its existence. Rob is not defeated. He is ignored, which is precisely the thing the universe did to him before it sent him to the void, and experiencing it again while actively trying to be noticed is a very specific kind of torture. He invents the alter ego of Dr. Wrecker because he thinks a more dramatic, more deliberately evil persona might give him the narrative weight he lacks. He gets voiced by a different actor in this form, David Warner in the original recordings, a deep and theatrical voice meant to signal menace. And even this is partly played as comedy, the spectacle of a character desperately trying to perform a category of significance he has been told he belongs to, while feeling, the whole time, like a fraud. The episode The Bus sees Rob escalate to genuinely dangerous territory. He rigs a school bus, takes the students and faculty hostage, and demands $1 million from the police with the threat of detonating an explosive. This is, by any objective standard, a serious crime. People could die. But even here, the episode cannot help itself. The comedy undercuts the menace at every turn, not because the show does not take Rob seriously, but because Rob cannot quite take himself seriously. He wants to be the villain. He is playing the role. But underneath every scheme is a person who just wants someone to learn his name correctly. There is a moment in the bus that tells you everything. While Rob is holding everyone hostage, conducting what he clearly intends as a demonstration of his power and intent, someone calls him the wrong name. And he corrects them, in the middle of a hostage situation. He stops the whole thing to say, clearly and firmly, the name is Rob. That moment captures the entire contradiction of his character. A person who chose this role as an act of survival, performing it with enough commitment to be dangerous, and still always caring more about being seen than about any specific outcome. The running gag of Gumball failing to remember his name is one of the show's longest-running and most precise emotional weapons. By the time you have watched about enough episodes to understand Rob's backstory, every instance of Gumball calling him Rolf or Ralph or Roy lands with a weight that goes far beyond the comedy. It is the show reopening the original wound, episode after episode in 30-second increments. The boy who forgot him in the void keeps forgetting him in the real world. The pattern that began with cosmic indifference perpetuates through simple human carelessness, and both hurt in exactly the same way. Underneath every villain, every failed scheme, every eruption of bitterness and anger, there is still a Cyclops who wanted to be the sidekick, who wanted a plush toy and a spin-off, who wanted someone to know his name. Rob eventually becomes a crossover character in the Cartoon Network show Villainous, which produced an episode called The Lost Cases of Elmore. In the episode, Rob is recruited and trained by the Black Hat organization to become a more competent villain. The training works. He becomes genuinely formidable. But because of the events of the rerun, because of the mercy he showed Gumball when he had the chance to destroy him, the Black Hat organization deems him a failure as a villain and subjects him to brainwashing to correct the problem. Even in a crossover universe, even among characters defined by their capacity for evil, Rob's inherent decency is treated as a defect. His inability to fully commit to destruction is the problem to be solved. The universe, in every version of itself, keeps trying to reshape him into something he is not. The tragedy is that he keeps resisting, imperfectly, inconsistently, sometimes through genuine sacrifice and sometimes through stubbornness, and sometimes through the specific mercy of someone who has known what it is like to be erased and cannot quite bring himself to inflict that on someone else. But he keeps resisting, and that resistance across the full arc of the series is what earns him the role he ends up in. Not the villain role, not the hero role, the guardian role, the one nobody sees, the one nobody thanks you for, the one that requires you to be satisfied with the fact that the world continues even if the world does not know why. There is a running joke throughout these seasons where Gumball keeps forgetting Rob's name, calling him Rich, Ralph, Raj, Roy, Ron, and other R names that are not Rob. And every time it happens, the joke functions on two levels simultaneously, as slapstick comedy and as a precise, deliberate reinfliction of the original wound. The boy who forgot him in the void keeps forgetting him in the real world too. The pattern continues. The erasure is structural. The episode that forms the absolute center of Rob's story, the one that elevates him from memorable antagonist to genuinely tragic figure, is a two-parter from Season 5 called The Disaster and The Rerun. In The Disaster, Rob acquires the Universal Remote, a device sold by a mysterious character known as the Shady Man from his van, The Awesome Store. The Universal Remote does exactly what it sounds like. It can control reality the way a TV remote controls a television. Fast forward, rewind, pause, skip, change the channel. The universe of Elmore is, in this device's hands, revealed to be exactly what the show's deeper logic has always suggested it is. A broadcast. A program. Something that runs on a signal. Rob uses it to devastating effect, pausing time, rewinding moments, manipulating Gumball's life in ways that are genuinely cruel. He kills Darwin. He reverts Gumball's family to infancy. He tries to eject Gumball from the universe entirely so that the show becomes Rob's world instead of Gumball's. And in the middle of this rampage, he says something to Gumball that stops the episode cold, that turns the comedy into philosophy in under 30 seconds. He says he never wanted to be the villain. He wanted to be the cute sidekick. The one who gets his own plush toy, the one who eventually gets a spin-off. He wanted to matter. He wanted people to care about him. But the story had no room for that. In the rerun, which immediately follows, Gumball ends up in the void and finds Rob there. And for the first time, Gumball genuinely reaches out to him. He feels guilt. He recognizes what happened to Rob as something real and serious. He extends a hand. And Rob, seeing this, seeing genuine human connection offered from the person who has been, in every meaningful sense, the architect of his suffering, through sheer obliviousness, makes a choice. He uses the universal remote to rewind time back to before the two-parter began. He undoes all the damage. He destroys the remote so no one can use it again. He fixes everything. But rewinding time also erases Gumball's memory of their reconciliation. The moment he pressed rewind, the handshake that never quite happened was gone. Their mutual acknowledgement, the first real moment of connection between them, evaporated. Rob gave up the one thing he had ever wanted, a moment of being genuinely seen by the person who kept forgetting him, in order to undo the harm he caused to people who will never know what he sacrificed. And nobody remembers. Nobody knows. By Season 6, Rob's trajectory has shifted completely. He has figured out what the void really is. He has decoded the metaphysics of Elmore. He knows the show is ending. He knows the static is coming. And his villainy dissolves into something else entirely. A desperate, doomed attempt to save everyone. In the future, he kidnaps Banana Barbara not to weaponize her prophetic abilities, but to understand the timeline. He needs to know if there is anything left to save. The answer, painted over and over in static on every canvas she tries, is clear. There is not much time. In the Inquisition, the original series finale, Rob disguises himself as a superintendent of schools, a live-action human called Superintendent Evil, and systematically transforms every student and teacher at Elmore Junior High into live-action humans. Because if they are real people, he believes, they can escape into the real world, into what he calls the other place when Elmore is consumed by the void. His reasoning is impeccable. His execution is disguised as villainy by circumstance. He is the villain, which means that when he tries to warn people about the coming catastrophe, nobody listens. When he tells the students they have two choices, to live in ignorance of what is coming or to hear what he has to say, Tina Rex knocks him unconscious with her tail before he can finish. He was trying to save them. When he wakes up alone in the school at night and realizes the transformation plan has failed, the ground begins to crack beneath him. The static seeps through the fissures. The void has arrived. It is consuming Elmore, starting with the school. And Rob, the character who tried the hardest and longest to warn everyone, who sacrificed his only shot at friendship to undo the damage from the universal remote arc, who has been the only soul in Elmore who truly understood what was coming, falls into the void first. The screen freeze frames on him. The credits play. That was the end of the amazing world of Gumball for years. A freeze frame of the character who cared most falling into the nothing, while the world he tried to save crumbled around him. There is something almost unbearably resonant about the specific shape of Rob's tragedy. It is not the tragedy of the person who tried and was too weak. It is the tragedy of the person who tried and was too right, too early, too caught in the wrong role to be believed. He was the villain, so when he told the truth, it sounded like a scheme. He was the forgotten background character, so when he screamed for attention, it registered as noise. He is a story about what happens when you are so completely defined by other people's expectations of you that you cannot escape them even when you are trying to do something genuinely good. But Rob's story does not end in the void. And when the revival series, The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball, released its season finale, The Rewrite, in December of 2025, it finally gave him what Ben Bocquelet described as justice. In The Rewrite, it is revealed that the shady man, the mysterious owner of the Awesome Store, pulled Rob out of the void in a post-credits scene and took him on as an assistant. Together, they have been quietly working behind the scenes to prevent Gumball and Darwin from discovering the fundamental truth about Elmore, that they are fictional characters in a TV show. Because, as the episode reveals explicitly, if Gumball or Darwin or anyone in Elmore ever truly discovers that their lives are a story being broadcast to an audience, the void will immediately return to claim everything. Awareness is destruction. Knowledge is the end. Rob spends the entire episode trying to rewrite the script of the episode itself, using a cross-dimensional laptop to prevent Gumball and Darwin from finding the plot holes that will lead them to the truth. He is, for the entire runtime of the episode, writing the story that keeps his world alive. He is, in the most literal sense possible, the author of Elmore's continued existence. And at the end of the episode, when everything has been resolved, when Gumball and Darwin are safely in the dark about reality, when the void has been pushed back again, the shady man retires and passes the Awesome Store and its responsibilities to Rob. He is the keeper now, the guardian, the invisible protector of a world that has no idea he exists or what he does for them. The character who was defined by being forgotten has found his role in making sure everyone else can go on forgetting. The character who wanted more than anything to be the protagonist has made peace with being the person who keeps everyone else safe in the background. Rob went from background character to mistake to villain to prophet to martyr to guardian, and the whole time, the whole beautiful, painful arc of his existence, the one constant was this: he cared. He cared about people who kept forgetting his name. He cared about a world that tried to erase him. He cared enough to sacrifice every chance he had at recognition, at friendship, at the kind of significance he spent his whole fictional life desperate for. The nobody became everything, and nobody will ever know. Section 4. Gumball Watterson, the boy who might know. Gumball Watterson is 12 years old. He is a blue cat. He attends Elmore Junior High in what is strongly implied to be perpetual 7th grade, a state of suspended adolescence that never quite advances the way real adolescence does. He is impulsive, loud, occasionally selfish, fundamentally warm, and the absolute undisputed protagonist of the story he inhabits. But there is a theory about Gumball, one that has been circulating in fan communities since at least the 4th season, that I find genuinely compelling. Not because it is dramatic or dark in the cheap sense, but because it is supported, quietly and persistently, by the show itself. The theory is this: Gumball knows. Not everything, not consciously, but somewhere in the deep, wordless architecture of his awareness, Gumball Watterson understands that his world is not quite real, and his behavior is at least partly shaped by that understanding. The support for this theory comes from an unexpected source. A fan on the Gumball wiki compiled a remarkable piece of analysis connecting Gumball's behavior patterns to a real academic paper by economist Robin Hanson called How to Live in a Simulation. Hanson's paper, which is a genuine academic work about what a rational person would do if they suspected they were living in a simulated reality, outlines several behavioral signatures. If you believed your world might be a simulation that could be turned off at any moment, you would tend to be more self-serving than your expressed values would suggest. You would take risks that seem irrational if the stakes were real. You would gravitate toward making yourself as interesting and engaging as possible, because the more interesting you are, the less likely the simulation is to be discontinued. You would essentially perform for an audience you cannot see. Go through that list and map it onto Gumball's behavior across 6 seasons. He is impulsive in ways that exceed even cartoon logic, taking risks that have no rational justification even within the show's elastic reality. He is selfish in ways that seem almost strategic, prioritizing the continuation of interesting situations over the genuine well-being of people around him. He gravitates toward the dramatic, toward the kind of behavior that generates the most narrative energy. And there is a specific episode, The Others from Season 5, that addresses this directly in a way that is hard to interpret as anything other than intentional commentary. In The Others, Gumball and Darwin discover that there is a student at Elmore Junior High named Claire Cooper, who has her own life, her own problems, her own storyline that does not involve them in any way. And Gumball's reaction to this discovery is not curiosity. It is not empathy, it is, in a very precise sense, existential disturbance. Because if Claire has her own story, then Gumball is not the center of everything. And if Gumball is not the center of everything, then his world is larger and more indifferent than he has always felt it to be. And if the world is larger and more indifferent than he thought, then maybe the thing that has been keeping him safe, his status as the protagonist, his narrative gravity, is not as absolute as he has always assumed. He tries to inject himself into Claire's story. He cannot help it. The show even has a moment in the disaster where Rob confronts Gumball with the truth directly, telling him that none of this is real, that he is a character in a story, that the rules of his world are the rules of a television show. And Gumball's response is denial. Pure, reflexive, almost violent denial. He does not engage with the philosophical question. He fights back. He refuses to accept it, which, on one level, is exactly what a person would do if they were confronted with an uncomfortable truth they were not prepared to face. But on another level, it is what a person would do if some part of them already knew the truth and was terrified of the implications. The intensity of the denial is interesting. It is not the dismissal of someone encountering a ridiculous idea for the first time. It is the resistance of someone who has been pushed against a door they have been leaning against for a long time. My own read on this, for what it is worth, is that Gumball is not consciously aware that he lives in a TV show. But I think he is aware, in the way that some people are aware of things without being able to articulate them, that something is fundamentally off about his world. He notices the inconsistencies, the way things reset, the way injuries heal too fast, the way people seem to already know who he is before meeting him. He has felt, at various points throughout his life, The strange sensation of the world bending around him in ways it does not bend around other people. He just cannot name what that bending is. There is also the matter of his actual name. In Season 3, in an episode called The Name, Gumball discovers that his legal name is not Gumball at all. His legal name is Zach. Zach Watterson. Gumball was just a nickname that stuck so thoroughly that everyone forgot it was a nickname. And when this legal name comes to light, something happens to him. An alternate personality, a darker, more aggressive, more confident version of himself named Zach, begins to emerge and slowly takes over. Zach is everything Gumball is not. Cool in the social sense, ruthlessly self-interested, without the underlying sweetness that makes Gumball Gumball. The family has to go to court to legally change his name back in order to restore the Gumball personality. Now take that at face value. A boy's identity is so thoroughly tied to his name that changing his name changes who he is. That is an unusual but internally consistent piece of characterization. But read it against the show's larger mythology and it becomes something else. Gumball, the kind and lovable protagonist we have watched across the show's run, is not the original personality. He is the override. The real kid, Zach, was suppressed and replaced by a version of himself more suited to the cartoon he inhabits. Gumball is a character written over his own identity. He is a persona that replaced a person, and the persona is the one the narrative needed. This is the show being almost breathtakingly direct about something. In animation, characters get redesigned. They get rewritten. They get reconceived from pitch to production to series. The original concept for The Amazing World of Gumball featured a black cat, not a blue one. The original pitch was a show about reject cartoon characters in a remedial school. The Gumball we know is a revision of a revision. The show knows this, acknowledges it in the rewrite when Gumball literally watches his own face morph from his first season design to his current design in a bathroom mirror and is briefly baffled by it and built it directly into the character's canon backstory. Gumball is a character who was rewritten into existence, and deep down the show seems to suggest he knows it. He just refuses to look at it. That refusal, that glorious, stubborn insistence on the reality, value, and meaning of his world, is simultaneously his greatest flaw and one of the show's most human qualities. Because what is the alternative? If Gumball accepts what Rob tells him, if he truly internalizes the knowledge that none of this is real, that he is a construct, that his world exists at the pleasure of an audience he cannot see, then everything he loves, every moment of joy, every genuine connection with Darwin and his family and Penny, becomes conditional in a way he cannot survive emotionally. The denial is not cowardice. It is, in its own chaotic, impulsive way, a form of courage. He is choosing to love the world he has, fully and without reservations, even though some part of him senses the static at the edge of everything. He is, in that sense, the best possible protagonist for this particular story. The person who fights hardest for the reality of their world is the person most afraid of what acknowledging its unreality would cost them. Let me walk through a few specific episodes that build on this reading, because I think the show is more deliberate about this than it sometimes gets credit for. The Downer from Season 2 is one of the most quietly remarkable episodes in the show's entire run. Gumball wakes up one morning and everyone is gone. The house is empty. The streets are empty. The whole world is empty. Just Gumball alone in a version of Elmore with all the color and chaos and human presence removed. He wanders through the deserted school, the quiet mall, the empty park, and at first he thinks it is wonderful. No one telling him what to do, no responsibilities, no people whose expectations he has to meet. And then the emptiness starts to eat at him. The episode eventually reveals that Gumball has been in a depressive episode, what it calls a downer, and that the empty world is his depression externalized. The other characters are still there. He just cannot feel them. He cannot experience their presence as real or meaningful. The world has gone gray and silent to match the gray and silent space inside him. And the visual emptiness of Elmore is the show's way of making interiority visible without having to explain it. This is one of the most accurate depictions of a depressive episode in animated television. The specific feeling of being present in the world but not quite in contact with it. The specific way that familiar spaces become alien when you are in that state. The specific loneliness of being surrounded by people you love and not being able to feel them. The Downer does not explain any of this. It just shows it in 11 minutes with the visual vocabulary of an empty cartoon city and a blue cat walking through it looking for something he cannot name. That episode matters to the question of Gumball's awareness because it suggests something important. The emptiness is there. The static is inside him too sometimes. And the chaos he throws himself into in every other episode is not just personality. It is the refusal to stop moving. The understanding on some wordless level that stopping means feeling the emptiness. And the emptiness is real, and it is close, and it is not something he wants to look at directly. The episode The Test takes the meta-awareness question from a completely different angle. Gumball takes an online personality quiz that tells him he is the loser of the sitcom he inhabits. The butt of the joke. The character who exists to fail comically so others can thrive. And Gumball, who cannot let anything go, who has to prove every point even when proving it will hurt him, decides to stop being the loser. He is going to change. He is going to be cool. He is going to refuse the role. And the moment he does, the narrative abhors the vacuum. Tobias Wilson, Gumball's permanently unsuccessful rival for coolness and popularity, steps into the protagonist's chair. The show literally becomes a different show. The visual style shifts to a cheap, laugh-tracked sitcom format. The jokes become broad and easy. The emotional texture disappears. Elmore reorganizes itself around Tobias as the new center. Sarah, who functions in the show as the embodiment of the audience's relationship with the narrative, is the one who explains what is happening. She tells Gumball that nature hates a vacuum. The loser role must be filled. If Gumball is not willing to occupy it, someone else will, and the show will simply continue around the new occupant. Gumball has to reclaim his role by being more himself than he has ever been, by leaning fully into the specific qualities the quiz identified as failures, and the world snaps back to normal around him when he does. The episode is hilarious. It is also deeply strange if you hold it next to the Void mythology. Because what it confirms is that Gumball's existence as the protagonist is not unconditional. Someone has to be the protagonist, but it does not have to be Gumball. His position is held not by birthright, but by continuous performance. The moment he stops performing the role, someone else fills it. The narrative continues with or without him. That is a horrifying thing to understand about your own existence. And I think Gumball does understand it, in the wordless, non-cognitive way he understands most things about his world. He does not articulate it, but he feels the pull of it. He feels the weight of having to keep being interesting, keep being chaotic, keep being the impulsive, slightly self-centered, fundamentally warm protagonist of his own story. Not just because that is who he is, but because the alternative is the test scenario. The alternative is the couch becoming Tobias's couch. The alternative is his world continuing without him in it. There is also a specific detail about Gumball's visual evolution across the show's run that the rewrite addresses directly and that I think deserves more attention than it usually gets. Between the first season and subsequent seasons, Gumball's design changed noticeably. His face became rounder, his features became softer. The rough edges of the initial design gave way to the version most people associate with the character. In the rewrite, Gumball literally watches this happen in a flashback. He looks in the bathroom mirror and sees his first season face and then watches it morph into his current design. He is confused by this. He does not understand what he's seeing, but the audience understands. They are watching a character becoming aware that he has been revised. That there was a version of him that was replaced. That the Gumball who exists now is the product of a design process, not just of living. This is the show being extraordinarily direct about its own production history. The amazing world of Gumball changed its character designs between seasons as the creative team refined their vision. Gumball looks different in Season 1 than he does in Seasons 2 through 7. The show acknowledged this in the most meta possible way, by having Gumball witness his own redesign, in a moment of genuine bewilderment, as part of the episode about the fictional nature of Elmore's reality. Gumball does not know what he saw in that mirror, but we do. We know he is the cartoon version of a person who has been redrawn. And the show is asking us to think about what that means for the questions of identity and selfhood that have been its central preoccupations from the beginning. Section 5. Darwin's Origin. Love, Evolution, and the Question of Who He Is. Darwin Watterson is, on the surface, the most straightforwardly lovable character in the show. He is loyal, optimistic, morally sensitive, and genuinely kind in a way that feels effortless rather than performed. He is the moral compass of the Watterson family, the character who consistently points toward the right thing, even when Gumball is dragging them both in the opposite direction. He is sweet, and he is earnest, and he loves his family with a completeness that is, by itself, enough to make you feel something. But Darwin's origin story is, if you think about it carefully, one of the most philosophically unsettling things in the entire show. Darwin was the Watterson family goldfish. Just a goldfish. A normal, non-sentient fish in a bowl, swimming in circles in the kitchen of a house in Elmore. He was not the first family goldfish. The show, in the Season 4 two-parter The Origins, reveals that Nicole and Richard went through several fish before Darwin, each one dying in some mundane and unfortunate way before being replaced. Darwin was the latest in a line of replacements, purchased from a mysterious vendor in a van called the Awesome Store, and given to Gumball as a pet. He was, in every meaningful sense, an animal, a creature without consciousness, without language, without the capacity for the love and connection and friendship that would come to define his existence. And then, through a combination of circumstances, he was accidentally flushed down the toilet when Nicole and Richard were startled by him suddenly speaking. And Darwin spent what appears to have been a harrowing journey through the sewers of Elmore, across traffic, past predators, through construction zones, navigating a hostile world on legs he grew during the trip, breathing air through lungs he developed along the way, before finally making it back to the Wattersons. The show's explanation for this transformation is, in its own terms, beautiful. The power of love. Gumball loved Darwin so completely, so unconditionally, refused so absolutely to give up on him during the ordeal, that Darwin evolved to match that love. He became a person because a person loved him that way. That is a genuinely moving story. The Origins made me cry. I am not embarrassed to say that. The imagery of a small fish hauling himself along on new, uncertain legs through a city that was not built for him, driven by some wordless understanding that there was a family at the end of the journey, is genuinely powerful. But Darwin did not evolve in any biological sense. What happened to him was not natural, even by Elmore's very elastic standards of natural. He was transformed. Some force, the universe, the narrative, whatever governs the mechanics of Elmore, looked at a goldfish that a boy loved and decided that the fish needed to be a character. It gave him legs, it gave him lungs, it gave him speech and consciousness and emotion and moral sensitivity. It upgraded him from a pet to a person because the story needed him to be a person. Which raises a question that the show occasionally circles around without quite landing on directly. Is Darwin real? Not in the crude sense. He is clearly present, clearly conscious, clearly experiencing his life. But in the specific, deeper sense, is the Darwin we know genuinely his own person? Or is he the personality that the universe assigned him when it promoted him from goldfish to sidekick? A goldfish does not have a moral framework. A goldfish does not feel complex loyalty or articulate love for its family. A goldfish does not have existential crises, does not worry about doing the right thing, does not express the kind of gentle, persistent decency that Darwin shows in every episode. Every single quality that makes Darwin Darwin was given to him by some external force, for reasons that had nothing to do with who Darwin was as a goldfish, because Darwin as a goldfish did not have a who. If everything you are was given to you by a force outside your control for purposes you did not understand and did not consent to, are you actually you? Or are you the character you were assigned to play? There is a specific episode from Season 5, The Puppets, which represents one of the most genuinely disturbing moments in the show's entire run. It is a crossover episode with the British experimental animated series Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, which is itself a show about the horror of being told who to be by external authorities. In the crossover, Darwin is the one who gets controlled. He gets taken over by one of the puppets from Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. And the puppet, in that show's characteristic flat and unsettling tone, tells Darwin that he is not really alive, that he is just a character in a show, and Darwin's reaction is terror, not confusion, not intellectual engagement, terror. The kind of terror that comes from hearing something that you already knew somewhere and were not prepared to have named out loud. The show implies, in these moments, that Darwin is the character most likely to have intuited the truth about his existence. His relentless optimism, his unwavering positivity, his absolute devotion to Gumball and the Watterson family could be read as genuine personality, or they could be read as programming. The universe needed a sidekick with specific qualities, loyalty and warmth and moral clarity, and it built them into the goldfish it transformed. Darwin is not optimistic because he has evaluated the world and concluded that things tend toward the good. He is optimistic because that is what his character requires. And the moments where this programming seems to flicker, where Darwin's brightness dims into something more complicated, are the most interesting Darwin moments in the show. They suggest that underneath the cheerful sidekick, there is something older and more uncertain. Something that remembers being a fish in a bowl. Something that knows, on some wordless level, that it should not be this. The episode The Roots from Season 5 also touches on this, in a subplot about whether Darwin should be returned to the ocean where fish belong. The family genuinely wrestles with whether they have the right to keep Darwin in a suburban house when his instincts, whatever those instincts were before his transformation, might pull towards something wilder. Darwin insists that he belongs with the Wattersons, but the episode leaves an unease, a sense that Darwin is a creature caught between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. He is the family's goldfish and the family's brother, and the protagonist's best friend, and a sidekick constructed by the narrative needs of a cartoon. He is all of those things simultaneously, and the show has the wisdom and the gentleness to let that complexity exist without resolving it. Darwin is real. Darwin is assigned. Darwin is loved. Darwin is constructed. All of it is true, and that perhaps is the most human thing about him. Section 6. Nicole Watterson and the Weight That Never Gets Lighter. Nicole Watterson is the most powerful character in the amazing world of Gumball in every measurable sense. She works at the Rainbow Factory. She can run faster than sound. She can generate energy blasts and create earthquakes with her fists. In the episode The Fury, she exchanges attacks with another character in combat that would look at home in a high-budget action anime, and she wins. In the fight, she single-handedly dismantles the home of a fully grown Tyrannosaurus Rex named Mr. Rex, using nothing but her bare hands and a level of focused rage that makes even the landscape flinch. She is the family's backbone. She is the breadwinner. She is the disciplinarian. She is the person who, when everything is falling apart, which in the Watterson household is most of the time, steps in and makes it right through sheer, overwhelming competence and willpower. And she is, if you sit with the details of her backstory long enough, one of the most quietly tragic figures in the entire show. The episode that cracks Nicole open, the one that changes how you watch every subsequent Nicole scene, is Season 5's The Choices. It is widely considered one of the best individual episodes of any animated television series, and it earns that reputation by doing something very simple and very difficult simultaneously. It shows you who Nicole was before she became who she is. We see Nicole's life from early adolescence forward, and what we see is a household defined by pressure and emotional volatility. Her father, Daniel Senecourt, had a violent temper. Her mother, Mary, was a perfectionist who demanded absolute excellence from Nicole at all times and found something to criticize in everything short of perfection. Nicole grew up in a home where the emotional temperature was always either too hot or turned to ice, where love was expressed through standards and expectations, and the perpetual implication that no matter how well Nicole did, it was not quite good enough yet. She trained obsessively in karate, likely because it was one of the few areas of her life where she had control over the outcomes, where effort directly translated to measurable improvement, where she could channel the constant tension of home into something with clear rules and defined progress. She was excellent at it. She was excellent at most things because the alternative to excellence in her household was disapproval. And she had learned to be terrified of disapproval before she was old enough to understand what she was afraid of. Then she met Richard Watterson. And Richard was, in every single way, the opposite of what she had grown up with. He was gentle. He was passive. He was completely, almost cosmically without ambition or demand. He was the only person in Nicole's life who had never once suggested that she needed to be better than she was. He was sweet, and he was ridiculous, and he loved her without conditions or performance reviews. She chose him. She chose him over her parents' expectations, over the path her family had mapped out for her. And when she did, her parents did not come to the wedding. Think about that detail. After everything Nicole endured in that household, after every expectation she met, and every standard she exceeded, and every sacrifice she made for her family's approval, when she finally made a choice for herself, for her own happiness, they punished her for it by being absent on the most important day of her life. The episode The Parents makes this even more explicit. When Gumball and Darwin arrange a reunion between Nicole and her parents, it does not go well. The old arguments come back, the old wounds reopen. Nicole admits that she was better off separated from them. And her parents, in what might be the show's most bittersweet moment, admit that they missed her, that they should have been there, that they regret it. But the show is too honest to let that admission resolve everything. It has Nicole recognize something important. Missing someone and actually changing are two different things. Her parents miss her. They would still be the same people they were. The reunion does not fix what was broken because the thing that was broken is not fixable by a single conversation. Nicole's anger, her superhuman competitiveness, her inability to relax, her almost pathological need to have a crisis to solve are not character traits that existed independently of her childhood. They are the direct products of a household that ran on pressure and conditional love. She inherited her father's rage and her mother's perfectionism, and she carries them both forward in a woman who cannot sit still, cannot be mediocre, cannot stop being the most capable person in any room she occupies. There is an episode called The Painting in which the school suggests Nicole try to relax, genuinely relax for a day. And she cannot do it. She goes progressively more unhinged as her nervous system, which has been calibrated for constant crisis since she was a child, refuses to accept the absence of a problem to solve. The show plays it for comedy. But underneath the comedy is something that anyone who has grown up in a high-pressure household will recognize immediately. She does not know how to exist without a threat. Peace does not feel like peace to her. Peace feels like the eye of a storm. Peace feels like something to be suspicious of. And look at the family she built. Richard is, by his own cheerful admission and the show's consistent characterization, the laziest person in Elmore. He sleeps. He eats. He watches television. He plays with his children. He needs parenting more often than he provides it. He is, in every practical sense, not a functional adult partner in the conventional sense of that phrase. But from a psychological perspective, of course, Nicole chose Richard. Her parents were demanding, controlling, and volatile. Richard is gentle, passive, and completely without aggression. Nicole found the one person in the world who would never push her, never demand perfection, never rage at her the way her father did. She found the antidote to her childhood, and she married it. The cost, of course, is that she carries everything. Every bill, every crisis, every practical decision, every moment of household management that requires anything more than enthusiasm falls on Nicole. And the show repeatedly shows us the toll this takes. Her anger is not just her father's inheritance. It is the pressure cooker of a woman who was never allowed to be less than perfect, who now holds together a family that would literally cause apocalyptic damage if left to their own devices, who processes every piece of accumulated stress through explosive rage because that is the only emotional release she was ever taught. The pizza episode, the grocery store episode, the fury episode. Every time Nicole reaches the end of her rope and the supernatural force of her contained stress releases itself on an unsuspecting environment, it is not comedy about an angry woman. It is the entirely logical consequence of decades of carrying everything while having been taught, from childhood, that needing help is a form of failure. Her superhuman strength, if you think about it within the logic of the show's mythology, makes a certain kind of sense. In a world where your power and significance are tied to your narrative function, Nicole's function is to be the safety net. She is the person who catches everything. If she stops being the strongest person in the room, the whole structure collapses. Her physical abilities are, in this reading, the universe's way of matching her capabilities to her assigned role, giving her the tools to carry what she has been assigned to carry. That is not comforting. That is not the universe being generous. That is the universe demanding a performance and upgrading her hardware to ensure she can keep delivering it. There is an alternate timeline shown in the choices where Nicole, in a world where she chose differently, becomes a dictator, a literal authoritarian dictator who runs Elmore with an iron fist and an absolute demand for obedience. And when you look at the psychological portrait the show has drawn of her, it is not even shocking. It is the most logical possible endpoint for a person with Nicole's combination of capabilities, trauma responses, and driving need for control, pointed in a direction where nothing and nobody can push back against her. She chose love. She chose Richard and the Wattersons, and the chaos and the laughter and the grinding daily work of keeping them all alive and functional. She chose the harder path, the one that does not give her control but gives her something she cannot quite name. Something that looks a lot like the feeling her parents' house never managed to provide. She chose to be loved back, imperfectly, chaotically, absurdly, but genuinely and without conditions. And every morning she gets up and goes to work at the Rainbow Factory and comes home and makes dinner and disciplines the children and rescues everyone from whatever catastrophe has developed in her absence. She is making that choice again. In a world that has assigned her the role of the load-bearing wall, she is also, every single day, the person who chose to be there. Section 7. Penny Fitzgerald, The Truth Beneath the Shell. For the first 2.5 seasons of The Amazing World of Gumball, Penny Fitzgerald is a mystery. She appears to be an anthropomorphic peanut, like her father Patrick, her mother Judith, and her younger sister Polly. She has antlers growing out of her head, which is the kind of visual detail that becomes so normal in Elmore that you stop asking questions about it almost immediately. She is one of the most popular students at Elmore Junior High. She is on the cheerleading team. She and Gumball have an obvious and mutual crush that neither of them can bring themselves to act on. A dance of almost confessions and almost kisses that runs through the first 2 seasons like a very sweet thread of romantic tension. She seems, in short, like a perfectly ordinary character in an unordinary world. And then comes The Shell, Season 3, Episode 20, and everything about Penny Fitzgerald changes forever. During a school production of Beauty and the Beast, Gumball accidentally headbutts Penny and cracks her shell. The crack widens, and out of the broken peanut shell comes something that nobody, not Gumball, not the audience, could have predicted. A shape-shifting, luminescent, fairy-like creature. Without her shell, Penny can transform based on her emotions. When she is happy and confident, she is a glowing, ethereal being with wings, something that looks like it belongs in a Miyazaki film. When she is scared or self-loathing, she becomes a monster. Massive, aggressive, terrifying, a physical manifestation of how she feels about herself in that moment. Ben Bacalé described the episode as Miyazaki-esque when discussing it in interviews, and the reference is precise. Like the transformation sequences in Spirited Away, Penny's shape-shifting is directly tied to the emotional and psychological state of its subject. Her form is not arbitrary. It is her internal state made external, rendered visible and unavoidable for everyone around her. Patrick Fitzgerald's response to seeing his daughter's true form is fury. He calls her unstable and dangerous. He tries to put the shell back on. He tries to transfer her to a different school, to contain the situation, to get control of something that has now escaped his control. He does everything in his power to put the lid back on the box. And Penny runs. The sequence that follows is the most emotionally concentrated 11 minutes in the show's entire run. Penny transforms into whatever form her self-loathing and fear produce as she flees through Elmore. A jackalope, a dragon, a wolf, a minotaur. The city reacts to her exactly as she feared it would. Pest control is called. People run from her. The world confirms what her father's reaction has told her. She was right to hide. She is too much. She is the monster she was afraid she was, and Gumball chases her. Through all of it. Through every form she takes. He is not running away from what she becomes. He is running toward her, refusing to lose her, refusing to let the gap between them grow too wide. When he finally catches up to her deep in the woods outside Elmore, she is in a wolf form, growling and enormous and terrified underneath the aggression. And she asks him something that has the weight of everything she has never been allowed to feel. She asks him if he can really love her like this. If what she looks like matters less than what she is. And Gumball tells her he likes her. Not in spite of how she looks. Not despite her true form. He likes her. And in that moment, without conditions or qualifications, she transforms. The wolf dissolves. The glowing fairy emerges. Because someone finally saw her, and what they saw was not a monster. The metaphorical content of this episode is not subtle, and the show does not ask you to strain for it. Penny's shell is a metaphor for every form of concealment that families and societies and traditions impose on people who are too much, too different, too honest, too big, too complicated for the space they have been assigned. Fans have connected it to experiences ranging from cultural expectations to gender identity, to mental health stigma to disability. The writing invites all of those readings simultaneously because Baucale's team understood that the image of a shell and the terror of removing it resonates across an enormous range of experiences. But there is a specific element of the Fitzgerald family's relationship with shells that elevates this from metaphor to something darker and more specific. In later episodes, particularly the transformation in Season 5 and the Amadane from the Revival series, we get more context. The Fitzgerald family has been wearing shells for generations. Not just Penny and her immediate family, generations. And the reason, as the show eventually reveals, is a belief that has been passed down through the family like an heirloom. Their shape-shifting abilities are dangerous. An uncontrolled Fitzgerald transformation, driven by extreme emotion, can cause real damage. The shell is not just social protection. It is a safety mechanism. But the Fitzgerald family has gone further than safety. They have taken a genuine risk, something real about their nature that requires thoughtfulness and care, and turned it into a totemic shame. The message passed through generations is not be careful with your powers. The message is hide what you are. The message is that the thing inside you is inherently dangerous, and the only responsible response to that danger is permanent concealment. Penny is the first person in her family's history to reject that message. She is the first Fitzgerald to say that the thing inside her is not just a danger to manage, but a person to be. And the cost of that rejection is real. Her father's disapproval, her family's discomfort, the knowledge that she is breaking with something her family has built their entire identity around. The dark implication, the one that settles in quietly if you watch the transformation arc carefully, is that Penny's family has been living in a cycle of fear for so long that they have mistaken the fear for wisdom. Each generation has passed on the shell with the conviction that they were protecting the next generation, and what they have been doing is imprisoning them. The shell protects Penny from the world. It also prevents the world and Penny herself from ever knowing who she is. And here's the thing that I find most interesting about Penny's specific emotional mechanics. Her shape-shifting is tied to her self-image, not just to her emotions in the abstract. When she feels beautiful, she looks beautiful. When she feels monstrous, she looks monstrous. Her body is not just an emotional barometer. It is a mirror. She cannot fake it. She cannot perform confidence while feeling terrified. She cannot maintain the shell of social presentation that most people use to navigate the world because she literally, physically, becomes whatever she believes herself to be. Imagine living like that. Imagine not being able to hide what you think of yourself on any given day. Imagine your worst self-assessments being immediately visible to everyone around you and your best moments being equally nakedly honest. There is no privacy in that kind of transparency. There is no middle space where you can feel terrible but present as fine. You are always exactly what you are. The show frames this in Penny's arc as liberation, and it is. But it is also one of the most vulnerable states a person can inhabit. She chose to be seen, and visibility means vulnerability, means that every moment of doubt or fear or shame becomes a public event. The moment in the forest when Gumball tells her he likes her is not just romantic. It is the first time in Penny's life that someone has seen her most frightening self and responded with acceptance rather than containment. And her transformation in that moment is not magic. It is the entirely rational response of a person whose self-image is made external. Someone told her she was beautiful, she believed them, and she became what she believed. That is not just a lovely plot point. That is how self-image actually works, rendered in literal, physical terms. Penny's story is the story of what happens when you spend your whole life believing what the people around you tell you about yourself, and then one person tells you something different, something true. Section 8, Larry, the Signal, and the Economics of Existence. In almost every episode of The Amazing World of Gumball, no matter where the plot goes, no matter which corner of Elmore the camera turns to, there is a high probability that you will see Lawrence Needlemeyer. Larry. Working. He is the cashier at the supermarket. He is the clerk at the video rental store. He is the attendant at the gas station and the manager at Joyful Burger and the mall Santa and the movie theater usher and the ice cream vendor and the parking lot attendant and, according to his own count in the episode The Menu, approximately 38 different jobs across the entire economy of Elmore. He makes $7 an hour, as revealed in the schooling. And in the episode The Night, there is a joke, delivered so flatly that it nearly bypasses the laugh and goes directly to the unease, suggesting that Larry never sleeps. He works every shift at every business in Elmore around the clock without rest. This is presented as a running gag. The joke is that Larry is everywhere, doing everything, indispensable and perpetually overworked. It is funny because the implication is so absurd. One man staffing the entire commercial infrastructure of a town. But the episode The Pizza changes the register of the joke entirely. The Wattersons have been rude to Larry one too many times. They have yelled at him, disrespected him, treated him as though he is not a real person with real feelings. And Larry, in a moment of completely justified frustration, quits. All 38 jobs at once, and Elmore collapses. Not metaphorically, literally. Society begins to unravel. Stores close. Services stop. People riot in the streets. The entire commercial infrastructure of the town, which has been running on one man's unceasing labor, shuts down in his absence. The episode establishes, without any ambiguity, that Larry Needlemeyer is the single most essential person in the economic life of Elmore. Everything runs because he is there. Everything stops when he is not. Now compare this to what we know about the Void. The Void erases things that are not relevant, not useful, not interesting enough to justify their existence. Molly was erased for being boring. Rob was erased for being a nobody with no narrative function. Larry is the inverse of Rob. Rob was erased because he was irrelevant. Larry cannot be erased because he is too relevant, too necessary, too completely woven into the functioning of every institution in town. In a world where relevance is survival, Larry has made himself simultaneously the most indispensable and the most imprisoned person in Elmore. He works 38 jobs because he cannot afford to be irrelevant. He works around the clock because rest is a luxury that comes with the risk of being judged unnecessary. There is a fan theory, compiled on the Gumball wiki and circulated widely in the fandom, that Larry's compulsive work ethic is not ambition or dedication, but something much more specific. Terror of the Void. He has consciously or unconsciously seen what happens to characters without a function. He watched, in the way that only someone paying very close attention to the background of Elmore would, the pattern of erasure. People who do not serve a purpose get removed. And so Larry, who has no natural charisma, no dramatic storyline, no love interest, No family drama, no cosmic significance, has manufactured his indispensability through sheer labor. He has made himself so necessary to the mechanical functioning of the world that the universe cannot delete him without the whole system breaking down. He is not surviving through personality. He is surviving through infrastructure. And the tragedy of that, the thing that makes Larry one of the most quietly heartbreaking characters in the show, is that it works. He is still there. He has not been sent to the static. But the cost is that he never rests, never has enough money to meaningfully improve his life, never has time for anything outside of work, and exists in a state of permanent exhaustion that the show plays as comedy, but that reads, from a certain angle, as a kind of hell. He is enslaved to his own necessity. The universe will not let him stop because if he stops, the world breaks. That is not freedom. That is cosmic imprisonment in the form of permanent employment. The contrast with Rob is the show's most elegant structural parallel. Rob was erased for being useless. Larry is enslaved for being essential. They are the two failure modes of Elmore's quality control system, standing on opposite ends of the same terrible scale. If you fall below the threshold of relevance, you are deleted. If you exceed it by enough, you are permanently conscripted. There is no comfortable middle. There is no sustainable position. You either matter too little or you matter too much, and both states are something you would not choose if you had the option. It is worth noting that Larry does have a personal life that the show occasionally glimpses. He has a fiancée, a woman named Gargaroth, who appears in The Question when Larry has his brief breakdown about the meaninglessness of a life defined entirely by work. When he finally articulates out loud that all he does is work, in that flat and devastated way that suggests the recognition is not new, but the verbalizing of it is, he kisses her goodbye and swims off into the ocean, which is a somewhat dramatic response to a philosophical crisis, but is also entirely proportionate to what he has been carrying. The relationship between Larry's labor and his ability to be present in his own life is one of the show's most understated dark threads. He works 38 jobs. He does not sleep. His fiancée exists in the margins of his existence, someone he presumably loves and probably never sees enough of because the economy of Elmore will not release him from its needs long enough to let him be a full person. The episode The Finale from Season 2 takes the Larry thread and extends it to the entire Watterson family, asking a question that the show rarely allows itself to ask. What would happen if the episodic reset stopped working? What if all the consequences of everything the Wattersons have done across 2 seasons of chaos suddenly came due? The answer is an avalanche of lawsuits. Every citizen of Elmore lines up to hold the Wattersons accountable for damage that has been accumulating since the first episode. Larry is among them, listing grievance after grievance. Property damage, emotional distress, professional disruption, the specific and personal harms of being on the receiving end of a family that breaks everything they touch and then wakes up the next day as though nothing happened. The finale is the show examining its own structure and recognizing it as unjust. The episodic reset, the mechanism by which Elmore returns to baseline between episodes, is not just a narrative convenience, it is a form of institutional immunity. The Wattersons cause harm, real harm, to real characters with real feelings and real lives. And the reset wipes the slate episode after episode, giving them a fresh start they have not earned and their victims are denied. The episode does not resolve this. It cannot, because resolving it would require permanently altering the show's format, and the show's format is part of what the show is. Instead, it ends with Nicole suggesting they go back to the way things were, and there is a fourth wall-breaking implication that the only solution is to reset again, to pretend none of this happened, to let the universe fold over the consequences the way it folds over the space where erased characters used to be. The show is saying, we know the reset is unjust. We know the comedy comes at a cost that gets hidden. We are showing you the mechanism. We are acknowledging the unfairness. And then we are doing it again anyway, because that is what the format requires, and we are going to keep being honest about the fact that the format requires it. That kind of reflexive, self-aware honesty is one of the things that makes Gumball extraordinary. It does not pretend its own conventions are invisible. It holds them up to the light, examines what they mean, sits with the discomfort of that meaning, and then continues. Because continuing is what stories do. The episode The Money takes this economic and existential thread in an even more specific direction. In The Money, the Wattersons run out of money. Not temporarily, not due to a plot that can be reversed in 11 minutes. They are flat broke, and as their financial situation deteriorates, the show itself deteriorates with it. Product placement begins appearing in dialogue. Characters endorsing brands mid-sentence with the glazed affect of people who have stopped fighting the corporate machinery. The animation quality visibly degrades. The world of Elmore starts to look cheaper, less detailed, less alive. The message is explicit. The show needs money to exist. Advertisements and ratings and commercial viability are not just external business concerns. In Elmore's logic, they are the same thing as existential stability. When the Wattersons are broke, the world they live in falls apart because the show that contains them cannot sustain itself. That is the show looking directly at its audience and saying, "We are a commercial product. Our continued existence depends on economic forces you may not think about when you are watching us." And in our world, that is not a cynical external fact about the entertainment industry. It is a physical law. It is as fundamental as gravity. Every character in Elmore is, in the final analysis, an economic unit. They exist because someone decided to invest in them. They continue to exist because that investment keeps generating returns. Their intrinsic worth, their relationships, their love for each other, their accumulated history, all of that is real and genuine and matters enormously within the world. But the world itself only exists because the numbers work. The void is not just cancellation in the narrative sense. It is cancellation in the business sense. It is the thing that happens when the economic calculation goes negative. And knowing that, or half knowing it, or sensing it without language, is what keeps everyone in Elmore dancing. Season 4, Episode 23, Gumball and Darwin are having a normal day in Elmore Mall when reality starts to glitch. Not in the dramatic, plot-driven way of the disaster in the rerun. In a small, domestic, quietly terrifying way. Gumball tries to compliment Darwin and his words come out wrong. The scene jumps forward, time skips. The world stutters and repeats like a recording with a bad signal. And Gumball, who notices, feels it, experiences the disruption as something wrong in the fundamental fabric of his reality, starts trying to articulate what is happening. Every time he gets close to saying something that would acknowledge the nature of his world, the signal drops out again. The scene jumps. His words are cut off. It is as though the universe itself is actively preventing him from completing the thought. And then comes the scene that stays with you. Gumball and Darwin are in the car on the highway, and the signal drops so badly that Richard disappears entirely from the driver's seat. The car is moving on its own. They are hurtling down a highway with no driver. And in this moment of genuine physical danger, Gumball and Darwin reach the logical conclusion that they have been circling throughout the episode. We are in a TV show. None of this is real. We are part of a broadcast. And then, immediately, without resolution, without acknowledgement, the scene snaps to the dinner table. Richard is there, Nicole is there, everything is normal. Richard is telling everyone that Gumball and Darwin made up after their argument, and the family laughs. And Gumball and Darwin join in the laughter unconvincingly. The only two people in the room who remember what just happened. The only two who know what they were about to say. The episode ends with one more glitch, and then it ends. There is no resolution. There is no in-universe explanation that fully accounts for what happened. The episode is the show explicitly telling you that Elmore exists as a broadcast, that its reality is contingent on a functioning signal, that the characters exist as data being transmitted to an audience. And any disruption in that transmission threatens their physical reality in ways they cannot understand or control. What makes the signal genuinely disturbing, rather than just clever, is Gumball's reaction to the glitching. He does not respond with existential terror. He responds with mild irritation. The way you respond to a buffering video or a bad phone connection. And that casualness, that weary familiarity with the world, occasionally behaving inconsistently, is more unsettling than terror would be. Because it implies this is not new. It implies the signal has always been fragile. It implies the characters have always, on some level, been one bad connection away from dissolution. And they have adapted to that fragility the way you adapt to anything that is simply always true of your life. Section 9. Miss Simeon, the joy and the horror of happiness. Let us talk about Lucy Simeon. Miss Simeon, teacher of a mixed-age homeroom class at Elmore Junior High, long-term girlfriend of Principal Brown, and the show's most consistently antagonistic authority figure. She resents her students with a specificity and a passion that goes well beyond professional frustration. She particularly resents Gumball, whom she has called a loser in front of his mother, whom she schemes against with a regularity that crosses from disciplinary concern into something more personal. Here's the detail that changes how you see her entirely. She has been teaching for approximately 2 million years. This is not a figure of speech. The episode The Ape and several others suggest, with varying degrees of directness, that Miss Simeon is genuinely ancient, that she was teaching before Homo sapiens existed, that she predates agriculture, civilization, recorded history, and the invention of essentially everything. She is a 2-million-year-old ape who has been doing the same job in the same kind of building, interacting with the same general category of student for longer than the entire span of human civilization. Think about what that means, not as a joke, but as a reality. She has graded approximately 2 million years worth of papers. She has managed classrooms and administered discipline and attended faculty meetings and updated her curriculum and argued with principals for 2 million years. She has watched species evolve and empires rise and fall and the entire arc of recorded human history play out. And through all of it, she has been standing in front of a chalkboard trying to get 12-year-olds to pay attention. The bitterness is not excessive. The bitterness is the only rational response to the situation. And her hatred of Gumball specifically takes on a new dimension when you consider the timeline. She was here before Gumball. She was here before the school. She may have been here before Elmore. She is the bedrock of the institution he disrupts every single day. And Gumball, the protagonist, the character who gives the world its name, the one around whom all narrative energy organizes itself, is a newcomer to a space she has occupied for eons. He is the new arrival who gets all the attention, all the narrative significance, all the gravitational pull of the story's central engine, and she is the permanent fixture who everyone takes for granted. The show never turns her into a sympathetic character in the conventional sense. She is genuinely unpleasant most of the time. She cheats, she schemes, she takes obvious delight in the misfortunes of students she dislikes. But the show also gives her, in moments, a dignity that is harder to dismiss than her villainy. The Joy is one of those moments. The Joy, Season 3, Episode 4, is the show doing something that should not be possible in a children's cartoon. A fully committed survival horror episode running 11 minutes that references Resident Evil 28 Days Later, Left 4 Dead Quarantine and Cloverfield, and deploys found footage aesthetics, security camera timestamps, and a gradually mounting sense of dread with the confidence and technical competence of a genre filmmaker who knows exactly what they are doing. It begins with Richard giving Gumball and Darwin one of his famous wonder hugs. A rainbow mushroom explosion erupts from the family, and when Gumball and Darwin arrive at school, they are smiling. Not just smiling, grinning permanently, unblinkingly. Miss Simeon, watching them on the security cameras in the teacher's lounge, knows immediately that something is wrong. Not because she can diagnose the specific problem, but because she is 2 million years old and she has seen things that nobody else in Elmore can remember seeing, and she knows when something that looks like joy is actually a catastrophe. The joy virus spreads through Elmore Junior High with terrifying speed. Stage 1, uncontrollable happiness, euphoria, compulsive smiling. Stage 2, coughing up rainbow-colored fluid. Stage 3, unconsciousness, followed by transformation into what the show calls huggers. Zombie-like figures with dilated pupils, permanent rictus grins, arms outstretched, drooling rainbow liquid driven by a single overriding compulsion. Spread the joy. Find someone who is not yet infected and make them happy. Force the happiness into them through physical contact. The infected retain fragments of themselves. In one of the episode's most disturbing details, Gumball, already a hugger, still pushes past an infected Banana Joe to pursue Penny instead. Even in the grip of the virus, his feelings for her persist in some diminished, compulsive form. They are no longer themselves, but they are not entirely gone either. They are underneath something, trapped inside a body that no longer answers to them. Miss Simeon is the protagonist of this episode. She discovers that the cure for the joy virus is sadness, specifically Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, because the virus feeds on positive emotion and is neutralized by genuine grief. She cures Principal Brown with it. She formulates a plan to broadcast it through the school's speaker system. And then she must get from one end of the school to the other, through hallways full of shuffling, grinning, rainbow-drooling huggers, to reach the cassette player in Brown's office. She does it by mimicking infection. She holds her arms out. She forces a smile onto her face. She walks among the huggers pretending to be one of them, performing happiness she does not feel in a situation where showing her real emotions would mean being immediately overwhelmed by creatures that want to make her feel what they feel. She is, in this scene, the most competent and determined character in the show's history. She is navigating a zombie apocalypse using nothing but 2 million years of experience and the specific kind of determination that comes from having survived things nobody else can remember. She is almost through. She is almost at the office. The plan is working. And then she sees Banana Joe. His banana peel is unzipped. A dress code violation. And Miss Simeon, who has been a teacher for 2 million years, who has been enforcing dress codes since before the concept of clothing existed in its current form, reaches out and zips it up. She cannot stop herself. The habit is too deep. The role is too fundamental. She is the teacher, and this is what the teacher does. And even in the middle of a zombie apocalypse with her survival, depending on invisibility, she enforces the dress code. They see her. They chase her. She barely makes it to the office. And by the time she gets there, by the time the cassette player is rewinding, it is too late. Gumball and Darwin are already inside, waiting. And Miss Simeon, who came so close, records herself on Principal Brown's camcorder as the rainbow liquid pours from her mouth and her eyes go wide. This story, she says, laughing, has come to a happy ending. The episode ends. The next episode begins as if none of it happened. Nobody remembers, nobody talks about it. The slate is clean. But here is why The Joy is not just a brilliant horror parody. It is a philosophical statement. The joy virus takes the thing that everyone should want: happiness, connection, love, belonging, and makes it monstrous. It takes the mandate to be positive, to be cheerful, to spread good feeling, and reveals what happens when that mandate becomes compulsion rather than choice. Forced happiness is indistinguishable from infection. Mandatory joy is a zombie apocalypse. The only antidote to weaponized positivity is genuine sadness, authentic grief, the willingness to feel something real even when the real thing is not pleasant. The show is saying something very specific here. In a world that demands your smile, that needs you to be entertaining and positive and upbeat to justify your presence in the story, the most radical act of resistance is to feel something true. Even if what is true is Beethoven, even if what is true is loss. Miss Simeon is the hero of The Joy because she is the one character who does not perform happiness. She never has. She has been bitter and resentful and genuine for 2 million years. And that authenticity, that refusal to smile when there is nothing worth smiling about, is what makes her immune. Her worst quality is what saves her. And her best quality, the deep, ingrained, entirely genuine commitment to her role as a teacher, is what undoes her in the end. She zips up Banana Joe's peel. She cannot help it. She is the teacher. She is the teacher to the very end. Before we leave this section, I want to spend some time on a few characters who deserved their own sections, but who I want to honor here because their stories connect directly to the themes we have been exploring. Carrie Kruger is a ghost. She is also Darwin's girlfriend, and she is one of the most genuinely melancholy presences in the show's entire cast. She floats through the halls of Elmore Junior High making sarcastic observations, possessing people's bodies briefly to taste food she cannot otherwise experience, and maintaining the specific air of detached irony that tends to develop in people who have had a very long time to observe the world without being able to fully participate in it. She has been dead for a while. The show never specifies how long, but the implication is that it has been long enough to matter. Long enough that she has watched generations of students come through Elmore Junior High. Long enough that the novelty of being dead has worn off and been replaced by something more complicated and less easy to name. She cannot eat. She cannot touch things in the normal way. She cannot exist in the same physical plane as the living people around her without specific effort. And she goes to school every day anyway, floating through the crowded hallways, arriving at the same desk in the same classroom, watching her living classmates do the things she cannot do. Darwin falls in love with her, and the show treats this with genuine tenderness, a real romance between two characters who are fundamentally different kinds of beings. But the show is also honest about what this means in the long term. Darwin will age, Carrie will not. Darwin will grow up, change, leave school, build a life beyond Elmore Junior High. Carrie will still be there. Floating, permanent, the same age forever. Their love story is not diminished by this. Love does not require permanence to be real. But the show is asking you to notice the clock, the biological and ontological asymmetry between a boy who is growing and a girl who is not, and the specific shape of heartbreak that asymmetry will eventually produce. The most haunting detail of Carrie's existence is one the show drops casually and never returns to. The show never explains how she died. We know she is a ghost. We know her father had a troubled past. We know she has been dead for a while. But the specific story of her death, the moment when she went from being a living child to being a dead one stuck in the perpetual middle school of the afterlife, that is something the show withholds. I think the withholding is deliberate. I think Bacalé and his team understood that explaining Carrie's death would puncture something fragile about her character. It would force the comedy into a confrontation with something genuinely grim. A child died. A child stopped living and became a ghost, and has been watching the living continue without her ever since. The moment you put specific circumstances around that, specific trauma and loss and grief, it stops being a character quirk and becomes something much heavier than the show can balance with its other tonal requirements. So the show leaves it blank. It lets the blankness be its own kind of haunting. And Carrie floats through the show with the specific lightness of someone who has been carrying something heavy for so long that they have made peace with the carrying, even if they never quite made peace with the weight itself. Richard Watterson is, on the surface, the most comfortable target for cynicism in the Watterson family. He sleeps, he eats, he watches television. He needs his children to remind him how to function as an adult on a semi-regular basis. He is, by Elmore's own internal accounting in the episode, the laziest person in town, having stolen that title from Larry Needlemeyer sometime in the summer of 1983 and never relinquished it. But Richard's backstory, assembled across multiple episodes, tells a story that is not about laziness. It is about a person who is never given the tools to grow up. His father, Frankie Watterson, is a con artist. A charming, irresponsible, fundamentally untrustworthy man who abandoned the family when Richard was young, not dramatically, not with a door slam and a climactic argument, but with the quieter, more devastating abandonment of a person who is just never quite present and then one day is not present at all. Frankie showed Richard, in the most formative years of a child's development, that adults are not reliable. That the people who are supposed to be there for you can choose, with very little ceremony, to not be there at all. And then there is Granny Jojo. Richard's mother is a woman of extraordinary protective instincts and absolutely no sense of proportion. She wrapped him in bubble wrap, not literally but effectively. She would not allow him to take risks, to fail, to navigate difficulty on his own terms. She kept him in a state of perpetual childhood by solving every problem before he had the chance to grapple with it himself. She loved him, fiercely and genuinely, in a way that left him completely unprepared for a world that does not arrange itself around keeping you comfortable. So Richard grew up with a father who demonstrated that adults abandon and a mother who demonstrated that adults smother. And he received from neither of them any real modeling of how to be a functional, independent adult. He does not have a job, not because he is stupid or fundamentally incompetent, but because nobody ever taught him the skills and confidence that employment requires. And also because, as the job confirms, the universe will not allow it. And here's the thing about Richard that I think the show understands more clearly than most. He is a genuinely good father. Not competent, not reliable in the practical sense, not the person you want handling the finances or making major decisions. But present, emotionally available in ways that Nicole, swamped with the practical weight of keeping the family alive, sometimes is not. He plays with his kids. He takes their feelings seriously. He makes home feel like a soft place to land rather than an evaluation. The episode The Hero addresses this directly. Gumball and Darwin accidentally make fun of Richard's uselessness, and he overhears. He is devastated. Not because his ego is fragile, but because he has been trying, in the ways available to him, to be a good father. And hearing his children dismiss his contribution as nothing is the specific kind of pain that has no counterargument. The episode becomes about the boys understanding that Richard's apparent uselessness, his willingness to be the butt of the joke, his cheerful acceptance of his own limitations, is not a failure of character. It is a different kind of contribution. He gives the Watterson children something that neither he nor Nicole had growing up. A parent who is just there. Not demanding, not absent, not performing. Just genuinely, softly present, with his silly jokes and his massive appetite and his perfect willingness to be made fun of, because being made fun of by his kids in a spirit of love is better than anything he was given as a child. The universe has imprisoned Richard in his role. The laws of physics will not allow him to be anything other than the lovable, incompetent dad. And within that prison, he has found the thing his children need most. He has made the limitation into a gift. That is not nothing. In the moral landscape of the show, where people are constantly being crushed by or fighting against the roles assigned to them, Richard's peace with his role, his ability to find genuine warmth and love inside the limitations of his assigned function, is one of the quietest acts of grace in the entire show. Banana Barbara is the last character I want to dwell on, before we get to the finale material, because her story is one of the most intricate in the show's mythology and is also the one most directly connected to the question of the void and the future. She was, before her breakdown, a normal and competent person. She worked at Chanax Incorporated. She was overworked, underpaid, and pushed to the point of a severe mental collapse by a boss who treated her as a resource rather than a human being. After the breakdown, she became the person we see in the show. Eccentric, seemingly confused, wearing a bow on her head to keep herself from literally peeling apart at the seams. Her gift, the ability to paint the future with prophetic accuracy, emerged from the breakdown. Her mind fractured, and in fracturing it opened to something larger. She can see what is coming, because in some sense the show never fully explains. She is in contact with the narrative structure of her world in a way that healthy, functional minds are not. The crack in her sanity is also a window. Every painting she makes comes true. The show demonstrates this across multiple episodes, showing us Barbara painting a scene and then the scene occurring exactly as painted. She is not hoping or guessing. She is seeing. And when she tries to paint the future beyond a certain point, past a certain horizon in the timeline, all she gets is static. The same static as the void. The same static as Rob's disfigured face. The same static as the end credits sequence of the original series. She is the prophet who paid for her prophecy with her sanity. She knows what is coming. She cannot stop it. And nobody, except Rob in his most desperate hours, has ever believed her enough to try. There is something in Barbara's story that echoes the show's larger concern with the cost of truth. In Elmore, awareness is dangerous. Knowledge of the world's true nature triggers the void. Rob's awareness made him the villain. Barbara's awareness took her mind. And the characters who remain comfortably in the dark, who do not know that they are fictional, who cannot see the static at the edges of the frame, those characters get to live normally. The price of vision is everything. Section 10. The Inquisition and The Rewrite. The End, the Silence, and the Beginning. On June 24th, 2019. The Amazing World of Gumball aired its Season 6 finale, the 240th episode of the original series run. The Inquisition. What followed was 6 years of silence. Not the silence of resolution, not the silence of a story that had reached its conclusion and left its audience satisfied. The silence of a freeze frame. A story cut off mid-sentence. A world left balanced on the edge of nothing, waiting. The Inquisition begins with Principal Brown running through the halls of Elmore Junior High in a panic. A new school superintendent has arrived. Superintendent Evil, a man who is, pointedly and deliberately, presented as a live-action human actor in a world of animated cartoon characters. He is played by actor Garrick Hagan, filmed in real life, dropped into the animation, and the visual effect is immediately and specifically unsettling. He looks wrong in Elmore the way that anything real looks wrong in a cartoon world. He is too solid, too present, too much in the wrong register of reality. Superintendent Evil's agenda is to stamp out the cartoonish behavior of Elmore Junior High's students. He instructs them to walk normally, to not stretch their limbs or defy gravity, or exhibit any of the physical impossibilities that come naturally to characters made of different mediums in a world built from mismatched styles. And one by one, students begin to change. They become human. Live-action human beings, people shaped where they were once cloud-shaped or banana-shaped or cat-shaped, stripped of the visual identities that made them who they were. The parallels the show is drawing are not subtle. A live-action authority figure arriving to make cartoon characters more real, more normal, more palatable for a mainstream audience that might not fully embrace their impossible nature. That is not a scene from a children's show. That is a scene about what happens to creative work when commercial pressures and corporate preferences override the vision of the people who made it. It is a scene about every cartoon that ever got retooled into something blander and safer because someone at a network decided the weird bits were losing them viewers. Gumball and Darwin resist. They go through the school trying to remind their transformed classmates who they are, triggering memories of their real identities, restoring their forms through the power of recognition. The episode is both genuinely funny and genuinely tense in a way that perfectly illustrates what the show has always done best. The comedy and the horror occupying exactly the same space, and then the mask comes off. Superintendent Evil is unmasked, literally, and underneath the mask is a face that the students recognize immediately. Distorted, polygonal, covered in static. One large eye in the center. Rob, who poses as a villain but is trying to save them. Rob, who has spent the entire back half of Season 6 preparing for what he knows is coming. Rob, who acquired Banana Barbara's prophetic paintings and watched the future turn to static over and over again. Who understands the mechanics of what the void is and what cancellation means for everyone in Elmore. He tries to explain. He tells them they have two choices: live in ignorance of what is coming or hear what he has to say. He is cut off by Tina Rex's tail. He is knocked unconscious. The students and teachers, not understanding that the villain they have defeated was trying to help them, celebrate. Rob wakes up alone in the school at night. The celebration is over. He is alone, which is where he has always been. And as he quietly despairs at having failed, the ground begins to crack beneath him. The static seeps through the fissures. The void has arrived. It is beginning its consumption of Elmore, and it is starting right here in the school, in the place where Rob became a villain and a nobody and a prophet all at once. He tries to hold on. He reaches for something solid. He cannot. The fragment of floor he is gripping pulls away, and Rob falls into the void. Screaming, the last character to appear in the original run of the series. The last voice we hear before the screen freezes and the credits play. And that is where things stood for 6 years. Those 6 years were strange for anyone who loved this show. Strange in a way that is genuinely difficult to convey to someone who was not inside the experience of it. The freeze frame of Rob falling into the static was not the ending anyone wanted, but it became the ending the show had, at least for a while, and people found ways to sit with it. Some fans decided the ambiguity was appropriate. Some decided the show had betrayed them. Some simply refused to accept it as an ending, the way you refuse to accept a comma as a period. The creative team has said in various interviews in the years since that the cliffhanger was not their preferred choice. The original plan was for a feature film to resolve the story, to give the Inquisition's ending the continuation it needed. But production realities, the chaos of the streaming era, the eventual fate of the intended HBO Max release, left the story hanging. The freeze frame of Rob falling into the void stood not as the intended ending, but as the accidental one, a story caught mid-fall with nowhere to land. Ben Bockley left the show after the 6th season ended, saying in September 2016 that he was departing after its completion. He spent years in the strange position of being the creator of something that had not quite ended and could not quite move on. The movie was announced in February 2021. It was greenlit in September 2021. It was pulled from its planned HBO Max release in August 2022, when the new management of the platform began its aggressive purging of animated content from the streaming library. The script was still being worked on as of the Annecy Festival in 2024. The ending was still somewhere in the future, unmade. And then the revival was announced. Then Hanna-Barbera Studios Europe, the renamed and rebuilt incarnation of the original production studio, began work on new episodes. Then July 28, 2025 arrived, and The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball premiered on Hulu. 40 new episodes. Bockley back as executive producer. New showrunners, new composers, new voice actors for the main characters. The same world, the same Elmore, the same characters with slightly different voices, making the same kinds of terrible decisions with the same fundamental warmth underneath. There is something fitting about the show, even in its imperfection. A show about characters whose existence is contingent on continued attention, ended because attention moved elsewhere. It is the most meta ending a meta show could have had. And a show about characters who survived being forgotten came back because enough people remembered. Then, on July 28, 2025, The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball premiered on Hulu. The revival, the continuation, the 7th season in spirit, even if the branding had changed. And across 40 episodes of new adventures in Elmore, the show rebuilt its world with a new team behind the keyboard. Ben Bockley returning as executive producer, fresh voices for the characters, and the specific promise of resolution for the story's most important loose end. That resolution arrived on December 22, 2025, in the season finale of the revival's second batch of episodes. The Rewrite. The episode begins with Gumball noticing something he has always, on some level, known. His house does not make physical sense. The layout does not match the exterior. The rooms are in the wrong places relative to the windows. And once he starts noticing, he cannot stop. He brings Darwin in, and they begin cataloging the impossibilities. They have not had a birthday in 7 years. Their character designs changed between seasons without explanation. Their voices were different once. There was that time Rob turned everyone human in the Inquisition, and nobody has really talked about it properly since. They are noticing the plot holes. They are noticing the seams of the fiction. They are getting close to the truth. From the awesome store, Rob watches this on monitors and panics. He calls his employer, the Shady Man, who reveals that he has known about Gumball and Darwin's proximity to discovery and has already begun writing a new script to redirect them. Because, the Shady Man explains, if Gumball and Darwin, or anyone in Elmore, ever fully realizes that their entire lives are fictional, the void will return immediately and consume everything. Awareness is destruction. The only way to keep Elmore alive is to keep its inhabitants in the dark about what they are. So Rob and the Shady Man begin rewriting the episode. They have a cross-dimensional laptop that can change the script of what is happening in real time. And the episode becomes a genuinely brilliant piece of meta-comedy and meta-horror simultaneously, as the two of them try to keep Gumball and Darwin away from the school plot holes, while the Shady Man's terrible writing keeps making things worse. The word lick appears in the script when he means kick, and suddenly a giant Hector is licking the school bus. The phrase and stuff causes those words to materialize physically in the town. The boys run from a mall that is literally chasing them because the shady man wrote they had to go to a sale. All of this comedy is running on top of something that is not comedic at all. Rob is frantically trying to protect his world. He is in the role of author. He is the one writing the story that keeps Elmore alive. And he is doing it while knowing that neither Gumball nor Darwin, the people he is protecting, will ever know what he is doing for them or why. When the situation reaches its crisis point, Rob makes the decision that defines his entire arc. Rather than let Gumball and Darwin find the plot hole and trigger the Void's return, he takes the blame himself. He constructs a scenario where he is the villain responsible for all the anomalies, where Gumball defeats him and the plot holes are explained away by his machinations, where everyone can go home satisfied that the mystery has been solved without knowing there was ever a deeper mystery to solve. He falls back into the Void as the defeated villain. Apparently, the show is not quite finished being clever because there is a post-credits scene where the shady man pulls Rob out of the Void again in the van and retires, passing the ownership of the awesome store and the responsibility for protecting Elmore to Rob. Rob puts on the keeper's uniform. The shady man opens a door to what appears to be paradise, bought with the earnings of everything he has sold from the van over the years, and steps through it. Rob is alone with the van, with the responsibility, with the knowledge that his job now is to make sure that the people of Elmore are never aware enough of their own fictional nature to bring the Void crashing down on them. He is the guardian of their ignorance. He is the keeper of the boundary between their world and the truth. He is the person standing between Elmore and the static, invisible, unknown, grateful to no one. The episode won the Best TV and Media Children's category at the 53rd Annie Awards. It is, by any honest assessment, one of the most elegantly constructed pieces of animated television produced in the last decade. It takes 6 seasons of thematic groundwork and pays it off with a finale that is simultaneously funny, emotionally devastating, and philosophically rigorous. Rob's arc, from nobody to mistake to villain to prophet to guardian, is complete. And the ending is appropriate in the most specific possible way. The character who wanted desperately to be seen ends the series unseen in the background, protecting the story from behind the curtain. The character who never had a role finally has one. The role is to make sure no one ever needs to know that he is there. It is, in the truest sense, a happy ending. It is also, in the truest sense, a heartbreaking one. Section 11. The Grand Unified Theory of Elmore. What it all means. We have come a long way tonight. We have walked through the Void and its terrible quality control. We have followed Rob from the static to the awesome store. We have traced Gumball's flickering awareness of his own constructed nature. We have sat with Darwin's uncertain selfhood, with Nicole's inherited weight, with Penny's liberation, with Larry's desperate and exhausting bid for relevance, with Miss Simeon's 2-million-year siege of professional bitterness, with the freeze frame of a world ending and the revival that answered it. Now let me try to tie it all together. Because I think the amazing world of Gumball has a grand unified theory, and I think that theory is one of the most beautiful and unsettling things that has ever been embedded in a children's animated series. The theory is this: Elmore is a television show within a television show. The characters know this on varying levels, some consciously like Rob, some subconsciously like Gumball, some not at all like Richard. The Void is what cancellation looks like from the inside. The character's survival is contingent on continued audience engagement. And every piece of behavior we have discussed tonight, every quirk and compulsion and trauma response and character choice, is at least partially shaped by an unconscious awareness that existence in Elmore is conditional. The show does not just imply this. It confirms it repeatedly, with increasing specificity across its run. Rob knows he is fictional. The universal remote controls reality like a TV remote. The episode The Signal shows Elmore's existence as a broadcast that can degrade. The Void runs end credits when it ejects someone from reality. The Inquisition features Rob trying to turn characters into live-action humans so they can escape to the other place. Presumably our world. The Money has the show's production quality literally deteriorating as the Wattersons run out of money, confirming that the show's economic viability and Elmore's existential stability are the same thing. The rewrite explicitly states that character awareness of their own fictionality will trigger the Void's consumption of everything. Every piece of this is canon. None of it is interpretation. The show built these mechanics over 6 seasons and a revival, piece by piece, episode by episode, and the accumulation of all those pieces is a coherent and genuinely philosophical model of a world that exists to be watched. And now apply that model to every character we discussed tonight. Gumball is reckless and chaotic because on some level he knows that boring characters get deleted. His chaos is not just personality, it is survival instinct. He is unconsciously performing for an audience he cannot see, keeping himself as interesting as possible because interesting things persist and dull things disappear. Darwin's warmth and loyalty and optimism are not just his own personality. They are the qualities the narrative required in a sidekick, built into him when the universe decided he needed to be a character rather than a goldfish. He is genuinely himself, and he is also genuinely constructed. Both things are true. Nicole's superhuman strength is not just funny power scaling. In a world where your capabilities are matched to your narrative function, Nicole is strong because she has to be the safety net. The story collapses without a competent adult. She is strong because she is load-bearing. Richard is cosmically imprisoned in his laziness. The episode The Job confirms that the universe cannot handle Richard being productive. He was assigned the role of lovable, helpless patriarch, and the laws of physics bend to enforce it. He is not lazy by choice. He is lazy because the alternative is the literal unraveling of causality. Larry works 38 jobs because the alternative to indispensability is the void. He is not a workaholic. He is a character who has read the rules of his world more clearly than almost anyone else, and responded with the only strategy available to someone without Rob's meta-awareness or Gumball's protagonist immunity. Penny hid in a shell because the story was not ready to reveal her true form until Season 3. Her suppression was not just her family's tradition. It was literal plot structure, the show holding a reveal until the narrative moment was right, and Penny experiencing the weight of that structural decision as the slow suffocation of a person who cannot be herself. Banana Barbara's prophetic paintings are not mystical powers that emerged from trauma. In a world where the future is already written, storyboarded, animated, and broadcast, her paintings are not prophecy. They are spoilers. She can see ahead because ahead has already happened somewhere upstream of the broadcast. The future is static, not because the void wins, but because the show ended. And in the space between the end and the revival, the future really was nothing. And the void is not a metaphor for cancellation. It is cancellation. When the audience stops watching, the characters stop existing. When the show ends, Elmore ends. The characters live at the pleasure of everyone who decides to keep watching. The void is us, changing the channel. I want to sit with that for a moment, not in a cold, analytical way. In the way you sit with something that is genuinely true and genuinely moving at the same time. The Amazing World of Gumball is a show about the terror of being forgotten, dressed up as a comedy about a blue cat who cannot stop causing trouble. It is a show about the fear of not mattering, told through the adventures of a family that matters to each other more than they usually remember to say. It is a show about what it costs to exist in a world that watches you and judges whether you are worth continuing. And it uses the specific mechanics of animated television, the mixed media styles, the episodic resets, the background characters, the seasonal renewals and cancellations as the literal metaphysical rules of its world. Ben Bockley started with rejected characters, characters that nobody wanted, characters that lived in folders and never got to be anything. And he gave them a world so warm and so funny and so completely, inimitably theirs that millions of people fell in love with it. And then he showed those people what it actually means to give something life. He showed them what it costs, and what it requires, and what the alternative is. The alternative is the static. There is something in every human life that is afraid of the static, the fear that you will not be remembered, that your absence will not register, that the world will fold over the space where you used to be and move on without noticing the fold, that the people you love most might forget your name, that you are at the level of the universe's quality control, possibly a mistake. Every character in Elmore is dealing with that fear in their own specific way, shaped by their own specific damage. And the show deals with it in the only way that actually works. Not by denying the fear, not by reassuring you that everything will be fine, but by laughing at it, by loving it, by making it the subject of 11-minute episodes that are also genuinely funny and genuinely moving and genuinely worth watching. Because here is what I think the show has understood from the beginning. What Bacalé understood when he gathered his rejected characters and gave them a home. What Rob's arc demonstrates across the entire run. What Gumball's refusal to stop living in the full, reckless way he knows how to live teaches us every episode. The knowledge that something might end is not a reason to love it less. It is the reason to love it more. The show is terrified of being forgotten, and it made itself unforgettable. Every character, from Gumball to Larry to Rob to Banana Barbara, is fighting the same fight. The fight to matter. The fight to be seen. The fight to exist in a world that might not care whether they do. And they fight it with whatever they have. With humor, with love, with chaos and rage and kindness, and the stubborn, ridiculous, magnificent refusal to stop being alive, just because the universe might be watching and might be judging and might one day reach a different conclusion. The dark theories of The Amazing World of Gumball are not about death or horror in the cheap, dramatic sense. They are about the things that actually scare us when we are lying in the dark at whatever hour it is right now. The fear of being forgotten. The fear of not mattering. The fear that the world you built your life around might turn out to be less permanent than you believed. The fear that the static is closer than it looks. And the show, this beautiful, impossible, deeply strange show about a blue cat and a goldfish and a banana who can paint the future, looks you in the eye and says, yes. All of that is true. The static is real. The void is out there. There is no guarantee the signal holds. Keep watching anyway. Keep caring anyway. Keep being here, fully and loudly and warmly and without apology, for exactly as long as you have. Because that is what Gumball does. That is what Darwin does. That is what Nicole does every morning when she gets up and carries the weight of a world she never quite chose. That is what Rob does now in the Awesome Store van, driving through Elmore in the quiet hours when no one is watching, keeping the static at bay with nothing but the specific, hard-won understanding of someone who has been forgotten and survived it. The show is not just a mirror for the fears. It is a mirror for the answer to them. You are here. The signal is holding. The static is just background noise. And tomorrow, Gumball and Darwin will wake up in their bunk beds in that house where the geometry does not make sense, and they will go downstairs and argue with each other over breakfast, and something will go catastrophically wrong by 9 a.m., and the day will spiral in ways that defy physics and common sense, and everything will be reset by bedtime, and then it will all happen again. And we get to watch. We get to be the reason it continues. We get to be, in the most literal sense the show's mythology allows, the force that keeps Elmore alive. That is not a small thing. Let me close out this final section with a few characters who have not yet had their full due, because the show's supporting cast is extraordinarily dense, with the same kind of layered implication we have been tracing all night. And I would be doing the show a disservice if I did not at least gesture towards some of them. Anais Watterson is 4 years old. She is in a class with students who are 8 to 10 years her senior. She has skipped multiple grades because she is, by any reasonable metric, the most intellectually capable member of her family and possibly of all Elmore Junior High. She speaks multiple languages. She understands advanced mathematics. She has the kind of clear-eyed analytical intelligence that makes most adults uncomfortable when they encounter it in a child. And she is profoundly lonely. The show plays this as a running joke, the way it plays most of its darker material as a running joke. Anais tries to make friends and drives them away with her intensity. She is too smart for the children her own age and too young for the children she is surrounded by in class. She inhabits a social no man's land, belonging fully to neither the world of her intellectual peers nor the world of her age peers, and the gap produces the kind of loneliness that looks, from the outside, like eccentricity. There is an episode, The Friend, in which Anais tries desperately to make a friend and ends up instead with an imaginary friend. a terrifying, violence-prone imaginary friend whose behavior escalates from mildly concerning to genuinely alarming over the course of the episode. The comedy comes from the friend's disproportionate reactions. The sadness comes from understanding why Aeneas created it. The real friends did not work, so she built one that would stay. The fan theory about Aeneas and the Void is one I find genuinely compelling, even though the show never confirms it directly. The theory is that Aeneas is the character most at risk of triggering the Void through intellectual discovery. Not because she is boring, she is anything but because she is a reasoner. She builds models of the world. She notices when the logic does not add up. In the episode The Oracle, when Banana Barbara's prophetic painting of Gumball ending up naked on television comes true exactly as predicted, Aeneas is the one who asks the genuinely devastating question: would any of this have happened if we hadn't seen the painting? She is asking about determinism and observer effects simultaneously, in the casual tone of a 4-year-old who finds philosophical questions more natural than social ones. And the rewrite would eventually confirm that she is poking at exactly the right territory. Awareness of the fictional nature of their world triggers the Void. Aeneas, who is constitutionally incapable of not asking questions, who cannot encounter an inconsistency without needing to resolve it, is the character whose natural intellectual behavior is the most dangerous in the specific terms of Elmore's physics. She is smart enough to figure it out, young enough that nobody takes her seriously when she does. And the show, with characteristic generosity, gives her an out. She lives in a family where her intelligence is treated as something to be grateful for, rather than something to be feared, even when it makes everyone around her mildly exhausted. The Shady Man himself deserves a moment of attention, because the revival has given us considerably more information about him than the original series did, and what we have learned is fascinating. In the rewrite, his full body is revealed for the first time. A pitch-black humanoid with large, furry arms and legs, resembling a Sasquatch or Bigfoot, with eyes that are the only light-producing features of his silhouette. He has been selling narrative-significant items from his van for longer than anyone in Elmore can remember. The things he sells are not groceries or household goods. They are objects that change stories. The universal remote, the evil turtle, various cursed and significant items. He does not sell utilities. He sells MacGuffins. He is not a merchant. He is a plot device dispenser. The rewrite reveals that he has been aware of Elmore's fictional nature from the beginning. He knows that the show's existence is contingent on the audience. He has been managing the balance between narrative engagement and void prevention as long as the show has existed. He was, in a sense, Rob's predecessor, the person responsible for keeping Elmore alive through the careful distribution of interesting things to happen. And in the rewrite, he retires. He passes the van and the responsibility to Rob, because he has earned his paradise and he is going to go live in it. The show lets him go with the particular generosity it extends to characters who have been carrying weight for a long time. He gets the door to the good place and he walks through it, and we do not need to know what is on the other side. The transmission of the awesome store from the Shady Man to Rob is not just a plot point. It is the show completing the circle of its own mythology. The character who was discarded by the narrative, who escaped the void and clawed back existence through villainy, and eventually transcended the villain role through sacrifice and love, ends up in charge of the mechanism that keeps the narrative alive. The reject becomes the guardian. The nobody becomes the infrastructure. Gumball will never know. Darwin will never know. Nicole will come home from the Rainbow Factory and make dinner and yell at the kids and go to bed, and none of them will know that somewhere in a van that is bigger on the inside, a one-eyed cyclops covered in static is making sure they get to wake up tomorrow. Making sure the signal holds. Making sure the world they love continues to be the world they love. That is Rob's ending. That is his gift to all of them. It is the most generous thing any character in this show has ever done. We have been here a long time tonight. We have gone from the void to Rob's basement to Penny's forest, to Miss Simeon's camcorder, to the freeze frame of a world ending, and the revival that caught it before it hit the ground. We have pulled apart every thread I know how to pull, and even now I'm aware that there are threads I did not have time to reach fully. The deeper mythology of Carrie's permanent death in a world of episodic resets, the fact that characters die and respawn constantly in Elmore, but Carrie's death is different, permanent, real, stuck. Idaho the sentient potato, living every day of his life in a cafeteria that serves potato products, surrounded by classmates who eat things just like him, navigating the specific and genuinely surreal horror of being a food item in a world that eats. The Robinsons and their quiet possible awareness, two grumpy neighbors who may have sensed the wrongness of Elmore long ago and responded by withdrawing, by refusing to perform, by sitting in their house and letting the chaos of the world happen outside without them. Hector Jotunheim, whose emotions are literally too big for the world, whose mother's love expressed itself as suppression, whose entire character exists as a metaphor for every child who was told they were too much and needed to contain themselves. Clayton, the compulsive shapeshifter who cannot stop lying, because the truth of who he is underneath feels more dangerous than the comfortable fiction of who he might be today. There is so much more, there always is, with this show. Every character has a story the show only half tells, leaving the rest for us to find in the quiet hours when we are paying close attention. That is the show's most generous quality. It trusts us. It believes we will look. It builds layers specifically for the people who care enough to dig. If you made it here genuinely, thank you. If you are just now drifting towards sleep, that is exactly right. Let the ideas settle. Let the images float. Let Gumball's blue face and Darwin's wide eyes and Rob's static-covered head join whatever else populates the quiet space behind your closed eyes. This is what Watterson lore is for. The slow, thorough, deeply loving excavation of a show that deserves every second of attention we give it. If you have not subscribed yet, please do. It keeps this channel alive. It keeps these deep dives possible. It keeps the signal from dropping, and if you want to see more of this, more characters, more mysteries, more of Elmore pulled apart, thread by thread in the quiet hours of the night, leave me a comment. Tell me what you want to dig into next. Tell me what I missed. Tell me where you watched this from tonight. The show is still going. Season 3 and 4 of the wonderfully weird world of Gumball have already been greenlit. The characters are still in Elmore. The signal is still holding, Rob is still in the van, sleep well. The static will be there when you wake up. But so will Gumball, and Gumball always finds a way.